Chapter 351, Qi Yunxiao's death. When Han Li heard this, he faintly smiled and immediately explained, "Young Miss Axan has misunderstood. This individual by my side isn't a living person. He's just a corpse that I had refined. Once young Miss Axan inspects him with her spiritual sense, it will be made clear." After Han Li said this, he took the initiative to stop and wait for Axan Ruyan to recognize Crooked Soul as a juncture. A short moment later, Axan Ruyan responded, I was mistaken. Senior Han, please come in." Axan Ruyan's tone was apologetic, but Han Li paid it no mind, flying forward on his divine wine boat with a smile. Just as Han Li flew forward, the scene before him brightened as the bamboo rooms that he had seen on his previous trip appeared once more. Two women were standing in front of the bamboo rooms, Axan Ruyan and her pretty maid. While both were wearing pure white clothes, Axan Ruyan's style of dress left Han Li stunned. Widow Axan, pay her respects to Senior Han. When Axan Ruyan saw Han Li arrive, she stepped forward and gracefully greeted him. However, her haggard appearance raised Han Li's suspicions. There is no need for young Lady Axan to be so courteous. Han Li continued on with a few polite niceties. At this moment, the young maid behind Axan Ruyan stepped forward and greeted Han Li. Han Li inattentively nodded his head in response. It was obvious that Axan Ruyan didn't intend to stand there and have a long chat with Han Li. With a forced smile, she led Han Li to one of the larger bamboo rooms. Upon entering the room, Han Li was left dumbstruck. Right beside the door, there was a table with a pitch-black memorial tablet with the words, "Husband Qi Yunxiao," carved into it in large characters. There was a small incense burner in front of the memorial tablet with several lit incense sticks slowly releasing smoke. Having seen this, how could Han Li not know what had happened? Han Li was beyond surprised to find that Qi Yunxiao had actually passed away. After he had recovered from his shock, he lightly sighed and took the initiative to approach the table. After taking out an incense stick, lighting it, and paying his respects, he placed it inside the incense burner. "Young Lady Axan, how did this happen?" After he finished paying his respects, Han Li turned his head and asked in a soft voice. "There is much to say. How about I give Senior Han a proper explanation in another room?" Axan Ruyan said with a feeble voice as the corner of her eyes reddened. As of now, Axan Ruyan was no longer the intelligent and shrewd woman he remembered. He only saw a pitiful young woman. In response, Han Li silently nodded his head. Axan Ruyan then led Han Li to a neighboring room and sat down. The young maid quickly steeped a pot of tea for Han Li and poured him a cup. Han Li lightly sipped the fragrant tea before setting down the cup and speaking with a solemn voice, "I truly didn't expect that after several months, fellow Daoist Qi would encounter mishaps. The heavens truly enjoy toying with men. Ah yes, when did fellow Daoist Qi and young Lady Axan marry? Had I known about it, I definitely would have sent a gift." Axan Ruyan bitterly smiled in response. Without waiting for her to speak, her maid answered on her behalf. "Senior, my clan's young madam decided to voluntarily live as young Master Qi's widow after his death." Han Li was left utterly shocked and couldn't help but gaze at Axan Ruyan in astonishment. "Young Mei speaks truly. I have decided to observe widowhood on young Master Qi's behalf." Axan Ruyan confirmed this, slowly nodding her head in response to Han Li's gaze of astonishment. This, Han Li was left speechless. This one has received life-saving kindness from young Master Qi on numerous occasions, a debt that can't possibly be paid back. If young Master Qi were still alive, it would only be a matter of time before I married him. Now, I am merely doing what I should. As she calmly said this, Axan Ruyan reached out with her flawless hand and lightly pulled away a strand of her beautiful hair that laid against her forehead. Han Li naturally had nothing suitable to say in response. Axan Ruyan then continued, detachedly giving Han Li an explanation of how Qi Yunxiao's death came to be. Due to Han Li's exhortations, Qi Yunxiao and Axan Ruyan were very careful and rarely went outside after he left. Nevertheless, after 2 months, Axan Ruyan lacked some direly needed materials to research the spell formation and had no choice but to make a trip to a nearby market city. This matter had unexpectedly been found out by Qi Yunxiao. As someone who was wholeheartedly infatuated with Axan Ruyan, he offered to make the trip for her. However, they couldn't possibly have known that the cultivators Han Li had slaughtered to save Axan Ruyan were actually juniors from one of the greatest cultivation clans of the state of Yuanwu, the Fu clan. As many juniors of their lineage had disappeared without reason, the Fu clan naturally pursued the matter to the finest thread. As a result, a few Fu clan cultivators wandering nearby had come across Qi Yunxiao, who had just recently emerged. Had Qi Yunxiao been shrewd or experienced enough, he would have been able to deal with any situation that arose. But unfortunately, he was far too naive and inexperienced. After only being asked a few questions related to the disappearance, he lost himself to panic and aroused the suspicions of the Fu clan members. They immediately wanted to arrest him and bring him back for interrogation. Naturally, Qi Yunxiao didn't wait for himself to be captured. With the formidable magic tools he had on hand, he forcibly escaped from the Fu clan Qi condensation cultivators and fled back to his residence. As such, Qi Yunxiao had doomed himself to calamity. The Fu clan cultivators were able to quickly track him back to his residence. However, the great formation he had laid down managed to severely injure or kill over 10 of their cultivators. In their fury, the Fu clan had actually dispatched a core formation expert. After half a day of fierce attacks, they were able to forcibly break through his great formation. However, no one had expected that Qi Yunxiao would hastily lay down an even more ferocious illusion formation behind his first formation while the tide was against him. He managed to trap the core formation cultivator within, giving him the opportunity to escape. Naturally, the other Fu clan cultivators weren't going to let him go so easily. Although Qi Yunxiao was able to break through their siege by using the remnants of his formation spell, he sustained mortal wounds in the process, and his loyal shopkeeper had died as well. Shortly after arriving at Axan Ruyan's residence, Qi Yunxiao took his last breath. The Fu clan was unaware of this and resentfully searched for Qi Yunxiao at every location. In addition, they had dispatched experts to monitor his residence. In this case, it was the old man and the youth from the Fu clan that Han Li had killed. After hearing Axan Ruyan's account, Han Li felt a slight twinge of sadness. Although Han Li wasn't a close friend with Qi Yunxiao by any means, he still felt that he was a pretty decent person. To think that he would die so young, the world was truly a fickle place. Ah, Senior Han must have come here for the ancient transportation formation. Having finished her account, Axan Ruyan suddenly mentioned this. Oh, that matter isn't urgent, Han Li spoke with embarrassment. After all, her husband had just died. This was not the appropriate time to inquire about such matters. I've just about restored the transportation formation. It should be finished in a month. Axan Ruyan continued, not seeming to mind Han Li's embarrassment. Really? Han Li couldn't help but grow excited and revealed a somewhat happy expression. Yes, really. Not only will I restore the transportation formation, but I also have 2 things to give to Senior Han. Axan Ruyan calmly said, taking 2 jade boxes out of her storage pouch and setting them on the table. What's this? Han Li blankly stared on in surprise. One of the boxes contains Yunxiao's insights, my husband's collection of tool refinement records. The other box contains a large amount of books on the Tao of formation spells and my expertise in formation spells. I hope that Senior Han will accept these items. Axan Ruyan faintly said. Han Li's heart trembled. After taking a look at the 2 jade boxes, he looked at Axan Ruyan with a calm expression and asked, What do you want, young Lady Axion? Why do you want to give such precious items to me? Please, speak bluntly. Han Li's voice held a trace of coldness. I am giving these items as a gift to Senior Han in return for a promise. Xan Rian didn't avoid Han Li's gaze, revealing an unwavering expression. This promise being. Although Han Li could faintly guess what she wanted, he still asked this with a heavy tone. If Senior Han were to one day enter core formation, I wish for Senior Han to thoroughly exterminate the Fu clan from the state of Yuanwu on my and Qi Yunxiao's behalf. Xan Rian's voice was as cold as ice frozen for countless years. When Han Li heard this, the resentment contained within her words caused even his heart to tremble. Chapter 352, Promise. Han Li didn't immediately refuse or agree. Instead, he tightly wrinkled his brow and lowered his head in silence, weighing the potential gains and losses. Truth be told, Han Li was unwilling to agree. As of current, Han Li held little interest in spell formation and tool refinement techniques. Only after he successfully reached core formation would he have the time to research such things. In addition, he was unwilling to provoke a huge cultivator clan for no reason, not to mention that he didn't have the ability to do so. I understand that this request is overreaching, but Rian truly doesn't have any other way. Xan Rian gave a bleak smile with a pale complexion. Elder brother Qi's death by the Fu clan was because of the incident that I brought about. If I do not avenge my husband, then I wouldn't have the face to see him after I die. I would prefer to go to hell. Xan Rian softly whispered with a pleading tone. When Han Li heard her say, die, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as he suddenly thought of something. He suddenly raised his head, taking a careful look at Xan Rian's complexion and leaving Xan Rian stunned in response. There is something amiss with your complexion. Let me see your veins. Han Li spoke in an irrefutable tone, greatly surprising Xan Rian. A queer glint flashed from her eyes. After a moment of hesitation, she obediently handed Han Li her flawless wrist. Han Li impolitely brought 2 fingers to her wrist and poured a strand of spiritual qi into her body. A long while later, Han Li's expression became unsightly. Are you aware that your blood vessels have completely withered away? If this is not addressed, you will die within 2 years. Han Li coldly said after withdrawing his hand. Xan Rian faintly smiled in response to Han Li's assertion. Of course I know this. How could I not know about my own body? My constitution is of the dragon's cry, a male body wrongly born as female. If someone with this constitution were to forcefully cultivate, their meridians would gradually wither away along with their lifespan. For me to have lived this long was by mere luck. Originally, I had hoped to find an ancient formula to cure this illness. However, I failed, merely wasting the many spiritual medicines that elder brother Qi had searched for in vain. Xan Rian revealed an expression of self-mockery. Young madam. Xan Rian's maid couldn't help but shout out with sadness from behind her. It's nothing, little May. I am only going to see elder brother Qi a bit sooner. This is exactly what I desire. Xan Rian unexpectedly consoled her maid with a peaceful expression. Han Li's expression grew soft and for some unknown reason, he truly felt pity toward her. But unfortunately, Han Li couldn't do anything about Xan Rian's strange illness and could only watch on as her life and beauty withered away. Since Senior Han now knows of this matter, he should understand why I have acted in this manner. Although Senior is currently only a Foundation establishment cultivator, you are the sole person familiar with elder brother Qi and me that has a chance of avenging him. I don't require Senior to swear an oath. I only want a promise so that I may pass away with ease. Xan Rian returned to her previously calm demeanor and nonchalantly mentioned the matter of vengeance again. Han Li stroked his nose with all his strength, finding himself in a rather difficult position. But after a moment of hard thought, he suddenly asked, "What about those from fellow Daoist Chi's clan?" "Humph, the Chi clan. They are merely a common clan within the state of Yuanwu. How could they dare to offend the Fu clan? Besides, elder brother Qi was only an external branch disciple driven out from the sect. They couldn't be less concerned. As for me, I've learned everything from a nameless formation spell grandmaster. He was a rogue cultivator that had long since passed away." Xan Rian understood what Han Li meant and explained her and Qi Yunxiao's background to Han Li in a soft voice. Han Li's mind grew quiet. He had truly thought that this woman had an alternative. "Fine, I can give young Lady Xan this promise. However, I will only act when I possess the ability to do so. If such an opportunity does not appear in my lifetime, will you regret it?" After pondering for a long while, Han Li took a deep breath and spoke in a heavy voice. "That will be enough. So long as you can give me hope, it will do. Let me thank Senior Han in advance." Xan Rian couldn't help but widely smile in response, suddenly appearing daintily beautiful. Han Li was stunned as he took in her beauty. But soon after, he shook his head and bluntly swiped his sleeve across the table, causing two jade boxes to disappear without a trace into his storage pouch. "Since you require another month to restore the transportation formation, then I will have to trouble young Lady Xan in a month's time. I will now be taking my leave." Han Li spoke unhurriedly as he stood up. With this gap of time available, he had quite a few matters to attend to. "This one pays Senior her respects," Xan Rian said respectfully without further urging Han Li to stay. As a result, Han Li flew to the Heavenly Star Sect's market city with Crooked Soul in tow. After a day, Han Li arrived in the vicinity of the market city. After he took out a cloak from his storage pouch and covered his face, he entered the market city with a swagger, bringing Crooked Soul along with him. As Han Li walked through the streets of the market city, he was astonished to find so many cultivators trading and bustling about. There were several times as many cultivators compared to the last time he came here. In addition to the hurried atmosphere, there were also a few rarely seen foundation establishment cultivators within the city. After pondering for a moment, Han Li's eyes flashed with thoughtfulness. But soon after, he tossed the matter to the back of his mind and went straight toward that magic tool store that helped him craft his magic tools on his previous trip. He had a few materials that could be refined into useful magic tools, thereby increasing his own strength. That magic tool store still looked exactly the same as before. Even its arrogant signboard was completely the same. Han Li entered the store with a faint smile. The circumstances within the store caused Han Li's brow to slightly furrow. The tiny store actually had 6 people standing and sitting around. When they saw Han Li enter, they couldn't help but glance at him. When Han Li saw them, he swept his cold gaze past them without a trace of politeness. In response, they immediately lowered their heads. As Qi condensation cultivators, they naturally wouldn't dare to offend Han Li, a senior foundation establishment cultivator. But a man with a fiendish appearance sitting in a chair looked at Han Li without the slightest hint of fear. Although he was only an early foundation establishment, he didn't turn his gaze away. Han Li didn't pay him any mind and walked over to the 2 store employees that were chatting. "Is store owner Su here?" Han Li calmly asked the burly man called Dahe. "Senior, who?" The burly man revealed an expression of doubt. Han Li sighed and took out the black dragon claws, revealing them to him. He was assisting at the side as this magic tool was created. There was no way he wouldn't have recognized it. So it turned out to be Senior. "This one will call Master out." The burly man's eyes brightened, recognizing the black dragon claws as Han Li had expected. He immediately apologized with a wide grin and hastily ran to the back courtyard. Seeing that Han Li was the store owner's acquaintance, the others couldn't help but look at each other in shock. However, nobody dared to untactfully bother Hanley. Not long after, the fully white-haired shop owner welcomed Hanley with a beaming smile. On his last trip, Hanley left him with a significant amount of rare materials. It was only natural for the old man to give him such a warm welcome. This small old man is honored to have Senior come to my shop once more. Does Senior wish to refine more magic tools? After exchanging a few pleasantries, Old Man Sue impatiently asked with a face full of anticipation. Hanley faintly smiled and deliberately swept his gaze past the other cultivators in the room. How foolish of me! Shop owner Sue exclaimed, immediately understanding what Hanley had meant. He then invited Hanley to the rear courtyard and excitedly led the way. The others didn't dare to say anything, except for the large, fiendish man who snorted with dissatisfaction. He was greatly angered at how differently he was treated compared to Hanley, as he was also a Foundation establishment cultivator who had even sought out this tool refinement store. In response to the large man's snort, Hanley shot an ice-cold glance at him. Hanley had killed no small number of cultivators and unconsciously carried a murderous aura as a result. That single glance immediately caused the large man to feel as if his entire body had turned to ice, and he couldn't help but reveal an expression of terror. Having seen the large man's expression had changed, Hanley didn't pay him any further attention and brought Crooked Soul along with him to the rear courtyard. At that moment, Dahe cleverly stepped forward and apologized to the others, casually giving them an excuse in an attempt to placate their discontent. Did Senior bring back more materials? When Hanley and Crooked Soul entered the rear courtyard, shop owner Sue glanced at Crooked Soul with slight surprise before impatiently asking Hanley. Chapter 353, The Stardust Pavilion. Hanley wore a slight smile when he saw the old man's eagerness. He casually took out the materials-filled storage pouch and turned it upside down. A white light suddenly shone, and the materials Hanley obtained from the white spider and demon mantis poured out onto the ground. This is, the shop owner crouched over and gathered together the white spider's lower limbs, inspecting them with rapt attention. He revealed an expression of puzzlement. Although the old man was a tool refining expert, he didn't understand much about rare, strange insects. As a result, even if he were able to see that the materials were unordinary, he was still left baffled. Hanley smiled for a moment before giving him an explanation. Most of these materials came from the limbs and shell of a white spider. There are also the wings and forelimbs of a huge demon mantis. They were both grade 4 demonic beasts. As for the mantis, it was a peak grade 4 demonic beast and was exceptionally powerful. I hope that your esteemed self will be able to properly make use of these materials. I had to spend quite a bit of effort to obtain them. Materials obtained from grade 4 demonic beasts. The white-haired old man shouted in astonishment and immediately sank into ecstasy. Not to mention grade 4 demon beasts, even materials from grade 2 demon beasts were rarely seen. That's right, shop owner Sue. However, for this set of magic tools, I have a particular request for what is to be created. I will only allow you to work with them if you are able to fulfill my request. Payment will be handled the same as before. If there are any leftover materials, you may keep a portion of them to do with as you please. Hanley said calmly. Senior, please feel at ease. Regardless of the request, this small old man will comply. To be able to personally refine such top-grade materials, I didn't spend my life pursuing the Tao of tool refinement in vain. Shop owner Sue then picked up the mantis arms and caressed them with a fanatical gaze. Hanley was surprised to see him with such an expression, but his heart grew increasingly at ease. He spoke to the old man with a gentle tone. The magic tools that I request you refine are rather unusual. I wish for you to refine the spider legs into a set of offensive magic tools. As for the mantis, 2 hours later, Hanley and Crooked Soul left the tool refinement shop. He had come to an agreement with shop owner Sue after the shop owner inspected the materials. Several days later, the shop owner would finish his plans for the methods of their refinement. At that time, Hanli would return with the materials and they would officially start their refinement. But for now, Hanli had an opportunity to take a proper stroll around the market city. His suspicions were finally confirmed by an old man as he was browsing around. It turned out that news of the defeat of the state of Yu and their two allied countries had spread to the state of Yuanwu. Regardless of whether they were from a cultivator clan or unaffiliated, all of those in the state of Yuanwu felt both uncertainty and premonitions of hardship. Consequently, massive numbers of cultivators flocked to the market city. Many even brought along their rare treasures to trade for direly needed items, thereby increasing their strength to brave the upcoming catastrophe. Within a short few days, all the market cities in the state of Yuanwu began to spread news of precious magic tools, pills, and other such items. A great number of cultivators were instantly attracted, leading to great furor within the market cities. Naturally, Hanli couldn't let such a golden opportunity slip by him. With that in mind, Hanli began to stroll around the shops, taking a look in every direction. As he had expected, there were far more high-quality goods for sale. But much to Hanli's surprise, there were very few top-grade magic tools for sale. Still, it wasn't as if Hanli had any need for those common top-grade magic tools. After walking in nearly a full circle, Hanli had only bought a few uncommon medicinal ingredients that he hadn't seen before. There was nothing else of interest to him. He subsequently headed toward the heart of the market city, the Stardust Pavilion. Having traded in market cities several times, Hanli already knew that if he wanted to buy better goods, he would have to go to the larger, more imposing stores. Only they would have the power to acquire quality goods. Though the small vendors might actually possess a few decent items, they had nothing compared to the collection of a large store. Not long ago, he acquired many quality items from the Thousand Treasures Pavilion of the Yellow Maple Valley Market City. With that line of thought, Hanli brought Crooked Soul along to the Heavenly Star Sect Stardust Pavilion, a huge, 100-meter-tall building. Hanli was rendered speechless upon entering. This was because there were over 30 cultivators bustling about on the first floor's hall. They were all surrounding several display counters, talking with red-clothed store employees. Not a single person noticed Hanli. Hanli scratched the back of his head and absent-mindedly walked toward a display counter, looking around for the stairs to the second story. 3 chi condensation cultivators stood beside the display counter. One of them was continuously waving a white formation flag while speaking to the store employee in a dissatisfied mumble. The Stardust Pavilion employee appeared to not mind at all. From the very start, he had been giving explanations with a wide smile on his face. However, when these cultivators saw Hanli and Crooked Soul approach them, they immediately grew silent. It was clear that they were very wary of unfamiliar cultivators. When the flag-holding cultivator saw Hanli approach, he hastily brought out several tens of spirit stones to give to the store employee before hastily flying off with his friend. Hanli gloomily gazed at them as they took off. He felt slightly at a loss. But just a moment later, the store employee politely addressed Hanli, "Senior, my sincerest apologies. As this is the first floor, I'm afraid there is nothing of interest here. If Senior truly wishes to find suitable items to purchase, then the floors above the third would be best. Those floors specialize in receiving high-class cultivators." Initially, Hanli was somewhat startled, but he soon recovered his usual bearings. He asked indifferently, "Could you give me an introduction to the floors of the Stardust Pavilion?" The employee appeared slightly surprised, but he respectfully agreed, "Of course. Since it's Senior's first time at our Stardust Pavilion, it's only natural that I introduce our store to you. Our Stardust Pavilion has a total of 9 floors. The first 7 are open to the public, and the last 2 are closed off to outsiders. The first 3 floors are for inferior chi condensation cultivators. Floors 4 through to 6 are for high-grade cultivators such as yourself. As for floors 7 and higher, they are at the service of core formation cultivators. The employee quickly gave Hanli a general introduction to the store. Hanli nodded his head and then wordlessly walked straight toward the stairs to the second floor. The second and third floors were a bit smaller than the first, but the arrangement was obviously more luxurious. It seemed that the farther up he went, the more precious the items that were on sale. With that thought, Hanli quickly passed through floors 2 and 3, even directly passing through the 4th floor. He had originally thought to head straight toward the 6th floor, but a young, red-clothed servant blocked his way. According to the store rules, you must first gain the approval of the 5th floor shopkeeper before being allowed to proceed to the 6th floor. The elegant, young servant expressionlessly said. Although he was only a chi condensation cultivator, he didn't fear Hanli, a foundation establishment cultivator, in the slightest. Hanli wrinkled his brow and headed toward the 5th floor's main hall instead of becoming angry. Although the main hall wasn't large, there were several young, pretty female servants waiting there. When Hanli walked in, a man and woman were having a relaxed discussion. The man had a common appearance and seemed to be about 35 years old. The woman appeared to be nearing 40 years old and had the grace of a noble woman. It could be seen that in her youth she was a rarely seen beauty. While the two were both foundation establishment cultivators, Hanli was surprised to see that the middle-aged woman was a late foundation establishment cultivator. "Fellow Daoist, do you require any assistance?" When the middle-aged woman saw Hanli enter, she turned her head and gave him an enchanting smile. She spoke with a melodious voice that soothed those who heard it. "I wish to purchase a few truly precious items. Do you have any such items? I don't care whether it is a magic tool, talisman, or anything else." Hearing that Hanli's tone was rather arrogant, the man glanced at Hanli with slight surprise. He. If fellow Daoist truly wishes to buy quality goods, then he has come to the right place. So long as you have the money to pay, we will definitely leave you satisfied. Although the middle-aged woman was no longer young, her laughter was just as charming as that of a young woman. But as it happens, this fellow Daoist also wishes to buy quality goods. Please wait for a bit, and I'll take out a few items for you to browse," the woman said with a beaming smile. She then turned her head and gave a command with a serious expression, "Violet Lotus, come and serve these two esteemed guests some tea." "Of course, madam," the maid standing behind the woman respectfully replied. As the middle-aged woman leisurely walked out, the maid poured a cup of tea for Hanli and the man who was originally here. Chapter 354. Madame Lanhanli and that man were seated on different sides of the square table. They took several glances at each other, but neither of them had any intention of talking. Cultivators who came here to do their shopping had no intentions of treading too closely to strangers, as it would only breed hostility. Despite this, the man still shot several curious glances at Crooked Soul, who had remained outside the hall by the staircase. Thanks to his perceptiveness, he had already made out Crooked Soul to be a refined corpse, but the spiritual chi fluctuations he felt from Crooked Soul's body left him quite baffled. After all, cultivator refined, iron-skinned corpses normally only had immense strength. It shouldn't be possible for them to possess magic power. The man strongly suppressed his desire to ask questions. Although Hanli was a mid-foundation establishment cultivator like himself, he was rather wary of him. After Hanli had sipped away most of the tea, the woman finally returned to the main hall. This time, she had two strong, robust men following behind her. These two men didn't possess any magic power and had rather stiff faces. They were unexpectedly two realistic-looking puppets. The puppets held a huge tray, wrapped in a bundle of silk cloth. It seemed that the shopkeeper intended on concealing the precious items within it. A strange expression flashed from Hanli's eyes. He had just used his spiritual sense to see through the red silk and find out what was underneath it. However, he hadn't expected that the unremarkable silk cloth would block him. In his surprise, he couldn't help but turn his head to look at the man beside him. He also appeared astonished. It was obvious he had done the same. The middle-aged woman approached Hanli and the man until she was a few steps away. She wordlessly smiled before she spoke. "I've already acquainted myself with you, fellow Daoist fan. Might I ask for your name, fellow Daoist?" "My surname is Lan." "You two fellow Taoists may call me Madame Lan." The woman gave herself a well-practiced introduction. Naturally, Hanli couldn't awkwardly remain silent, so he reluctantly said, "My surname is Han." Afterwards, he said nothing further and displayed a cold demeanor, unwilling to speak further. Madame Lan didn't take this to heart. After all, a vast majority of cultivators that came here feigned indifference like Hanli. It was something she had long become accustomed to. As a result, she smiled slightly and beckoned to the puppets behind her. The well-chiseled puppets immediately walked forward. Afterwards, Madame Lan extended her flawless finger and lifted the red cloth cover, revealing the several items underneath. Hanli and the man surnamed Fan simultaneously gazed at the items on the tray, their eyes gleaming with rapt attention. A long sword, short blade, throwing dart, a ring, and a piece of jet-black armor were arranged in a line. From one glance at the sparkling shine each of these items radiated, one could tell that these were not common goods. Once the magic tools on the dish were clearly seen, Hanli and the man surnamed Fan had differing reactions. The cultivator named Fan intensely stared at the plate with a gaze containing a slight trace of exhilaration. But when Hanli glanced at them, he immediately turned his gaze away, revealing a lack of interest. This greatly surprised Madame Lan, causing her to pay closer attention to Hanli. This item is called the Cold Crystal Blade. It was refined using rare profound crystal and ice jade. Not only are its attacks powerful, it also possesses dark cold chi, capable of unknowingly decreasing the power of enemies in a chaotic battle. It truly is a quality item among top-grade magic tools. The woman calmly introduced the item after deftly grabbing the transparent, sparkling short blade from the tray and lifting it into the air. She then waved the magic tool in her hand, immediately releasing a breeze of icy chi. Could it be that these magic tools aren't worthy of fellow Daoists' notice? Madame Lan asked with a slight smile. It was quite strange. She clearly knew that the person before her had inferior cultivation to her own. But for some unknown reason, she felt a trace of strange danger from Hanli, causing her speech to unconsciously become more tactful towards him as she didn't dare to offend him. While the quality of these magic tools are quite decent, I am looking for magic tools that are a bit more exceptional. They must also be well suited to my techniques. Furthermore, not only am I looking for magic tools and talismans, I am also interested in rare items. Hanli replied serenely. Oh. If fellow Daoist Han had such requests, he should have said them sooner. This one had believed that fellow Daoist Han would have been satisfied with any kind of magic tool, the same as fellow Daoist Fan. Madame Lan couldn't help but giggle. She then continued speaking with great confidence, "So long as fellow Daoist is able to pay the price, our Stardust Pavilion will provide all the items you desire." Hanli dryly laughed and directly answered with a question, "Since Madame insists, I will bluntly mention them. Does your esteemed pavilion have any pill formulas useful to Foundation establishment cultivators for sale? Or any sets of magic tools?" Naturally, the greater the number in a magic tool set, the better. The woman's face revealed slight emotion before immediately regaining her calm. Madame Lan stared at Hanli with her beautiful eyes before speaking deliberately. "Fellow Daoist requests are truly unusual. Were it half a month ago, I may have been left helpless. But now, my pavilion had acquired 2 such pill formulas and a set of high-quality magic tools. The prices of these items are truly great. They are not something that I am able to sell. Fellow Daoist will have to continue this conversation on the 6th floor. Hanli had anticipated what the woman would say and asked indifferently, then am I allowed to go up to the 6th floor? Madame Lan lightly brushed her hair before gently smiling. Of course you can. But in accordance to sect rules, I must first inspect fellow Daoists' qualifications. What qualifications? Hanli casually asked. It's very simple. It is whether or not fellow Daoist possesses 1,000 spirit stones or items of equivalent value. The woman stated with an earnest tone. Is this enough? Without any objections, Hanli took out the storage pouch that kept his spirit stones and tossed it toward the woman. Hanli's collection of spirit stones had reached 1,000 long ago. Now, he should be in possession of nearly 2,000 spirit stones. Madame Lan took the storage pouch and examined it with her spiritual sense. She then nodded her head and said, Please follow me. I will personally accompany you to the 6th floor. When Hanli saw her walking towards the stairs, he silently followed after her. The young, red-clothed servant guarding the stairwell silently stepped to the side upon seeing Madame Lan approach. Hanli and Madame Lan then climbed to the 6th floor one after the other. When the young woman saw that Hanli was inspecting the pill formulas, she took out a thin, white book and started to read through it without the slightest of concern. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, Hanli withdrew his spiritual sense and wore an expression of contemplation. One of the formulas was similar to the qi-gathering pill that Lei Wanhe had previously given him. It was useless to him. As for the other, it wasn't an ancient pill formula. It was for a pill called the True Essence pill. Apart from the required age of the ingredients used, it was rather easy to refine. It was very suitable for his use. However, the cost of this pill formula was unexpectedly several times greater than the qi-gathering pill formula. Even Hanli understood the difference in value between ancient formulas and ordinary formulas that were currently used in the cultivation world. With that thought, Hanli returned the jade slips to their boxes with an indifferent expression. Then he took the larger box and opened it. The magic tools in the box caused Hanli to become stunned from a single glance. The jade box actually contained a set of 13 fine needles sparkling with red light. Each of the needles were only about an inch long, but their fire-red bodies emitted a fluctuating glow. Flying needle magic tools. Hanli couldn't help but mutter in astonishment. Even with Hanli's vast experience with magic tools, this was the first time he had seen flying needle magic tools such as these. He suddenly grew very excited. He previously hadn't seen anyone make full use of them either. When the young woman heard Hanli's murmurs, she couldn't help but turn her head to look at him with a trace of displeasure. She then continued to read the book without paying him any further attention. At that moment, Hanli was carefully examining one of the red needles as he held it in a pinch without paying any attention to the young woman's displeasure. Naturally, he was aware of her displeasure, but he wasn't about to accommodate her aloof, arrogant attitude. He was now staring at the needle with squinted eyes and a serious expression. Although Hanli hadn't seen any needle-type magic tools previously, he had heard many rumors with regards to the stealthy viciousness of flying needles. He had heard that while their offensive power were slightly inferior to ordinary magic tools, their bodies were small, and their flight was quick, thereby being the most suitable weapon to launch an ambush with. As such, many cultivators praised the flying needles to be a hidden weapon, causing flying needles to possess quite the reputation in the cultivation world. Naturally, there were many reasons as to why flying needle magic tools were so thin. Not only were they refined using peculiar materials, they were also several times more difficult to refine. Because of this, they were rarely seen in the cultivation world. In addition, users of flying needles would often only use them as a last resort since they were unwilling to allow others to know of their existence. This was why Hanley received such a shock when he saw a set of 13 such magic tools unexpectedly appear before him. "Young miss, does this set of flying needles have a name?" Hanley felt very pleasantly surprised, but his expression remained calm when he asked the young woman. When the young woman heard Hanley, she put down the book and indifferently said, "The red thread shadow chaser needles." "Good. I wish to acquire the true essence pill along with the set of flying needles." Hanley spoke without the slightest hesitation. The young woman revealed a strange expression as she asked with disbelief, "You truly want that set of magic tools? What is it? Does this set of magic tools have some sort of defect, or is your esteemed pavilion unwilling to sell it?" Hanley raised his eyebrows in dissatisfaction. "Your esteemed self is mistaken. Although the red thread shadow chaser needles are extremely precious, our Stardust Pavilion does not wish to keep it. I merely ask this because there is something I must first tell you. This set of flying needles is substantially different from ordinary sets of magic tools. There is no origin controller, nor any child mother pieces. If you wish to activate them, you must simultaneously control all 13 needles. Otherwise, they would be useless." The young woman's eyes and tone were both ice-cold. "I must simultaneously control them." Hanley came to a suddenly realization. It was no wonder that these rare flying needles had yet to be purchased. It held such a high requirement for one's spiritual sense. The young woman continued without the slightest of humor, "That's right. Originally, Aunt Lon and a few others fancied this set of magic tools, but because they were only able to control up to 9 needles, they have given up on it." "So, all 13 needles then?" Hanley chuckled before suddenly raising his hand, beckoning to the rest of the needles in the box. With a flash of red light, all of the flying needles simultaneously floated. The red needles quickly revolved around Hanley, transforming into 13 red threads that were difficult for the naked eye to see, creating a finely woven red net in an instant. The young woman's small mouth gaped, revealing an appearance of surprise to Hanley for the first time. Hanley soon waved his hand once more, returning the red threads to the jade box, which once again revealed their original appearance as needles. With an unchanged expression, Hanley asked with a deep voice, "Am I able to purchase these magic tools now?" "Since your esteemed self is able to use them, of course you can. Together with the true essence pill formula, it will come to a total of 4,000 spirit stones." The young woman regained her calm and once again spoke without the slightest humor. 4,000 spirit stones. Hanley looked at the young woman while rubbing his nose. That price had exceeded his expectations. The pill formula is 1,500 spirit stones. The flying needles are 2,500. The young woman listed the price without the slightest hesitation. To tell the truth, the woman didn't see the 4,000 spirit stones as overly expensive. After all, these items were rarely seen within the cultivation world. Were it not for the defeat of the 3 allied countries against the Devil Dao, they would have never sold such valuable items. At that moment, Hanley suddenly took a seat and assumed a solemn expression. "At what price does your esteemed pavilion purchase 1,000-year-old spiritual medicine?" Chapter 356, Disaster and Fortune come hand in hand. Hanley calmly walked out from the Stardust Pavilion a quarter hour later. He turned his head to look at the huge pavilion with a faint, mysterious smile on his face before continuing on with long strides. Hanley currently had the red thread shadow chaser needles, and a jade slip containing the true essence pill formula inside his storage pouch. Moments ago, he had casually asked about the selling price of 1,000-year-old spiritual medicine. Instead of taking out any herbs, he took out 2 boxes each containing a face-setting pill, created from 1,000-year-old herbs, and handed it over to the young woman. Hanley vividly remembered the fervent expression of the usually aloof woman when he told her about the face-setting pill's miraculous effect of an unchanging appearance. The sharp contrast with her usual expression had surprised him by no small measure. Soon after, the young woman called over a pill refinement expert from the Stardust Pavilion to personally confirm the claims. However, none of them had refined such a pill before. In the end, she brought the 2 medicine pills to the 5th floor's Madame Lawn to verify the legitimacy of the face-setting pills, as well as their miraculous effect of preserving one's appearance. After a whispered discussion, the women decided that Hanli could pay for the pill formula and the magic tool set with the 2 face-setting pills along with 1,000 spirit stones. Now that he thought about it, he felt it was quite funny. Being able to eternally preserve one's appearance was a matter that proved extremely enticing and irresistible to women. Even such a clever schemer with such deep cultivation as Madame Lawn revealed the same fervent expression as the young woman upon hearing Hanli say the words, face-setting pill. As a result, Hanli came to a complete understanding about how greatly women cared about their appearance. However, the amount that Hanli had acquired for the face-setting pills had far exceeded his estimations. He had originally believed that the pills would get him 2,000 spirit stones at most. Therefore, their offer had left Hanli completely satisfied. Naturally, he didn't attempt to haggle over the price and ignore their generous offer. It was quite fortunate that the 2 shopkeepers were women. Were it a male shopkeeper, he would have been quite lucky to get a few hundred spirit stones for them. After he finished the trade, Madame Lawn couldn't help but ask about the medicine pill's origin after recovering from her earlier fervor. Hanli thoughtlessly replied, it was an unintentional discovery, before making himself scarce. As Hanli walked out of the Stardust Pavilion, he felt some reluctance. He knew that since the Stardust Pavilion was able to take out such rarities as pill formulas and the red thread shadow chaser needles, they were certain to have even more precious items. It was a pity that he wasn't able to take out more medicine pills and spiritual herbs for trade, as Hanli clearly understood the dangers of openly revealing one's wealth. With regret lingering in his heart, Hanli found an inn that accommodated cultivators and decided to stay there. For the remainder of the day, Hanli started to meditate and refine qi, preparing for the next day when he would have store owner Su refine his magic tools. On the morning of the second day, Hanli arrived at the tool refinement store in accordance with the appointed time. Store owner Su had been waiting for him for quite a while. Once he saw Hanli, he immediately called out to him in excitement, urging him to enter the rear courtyard. Hanli gave a slight smile and entered. Half a month later, Hanli finally emerged from the store. But this time, he appeared to be the opposite of how he entered and wore a darkened expression as if he were in an exceptionally foul mood. Store owner Su closely followed behind him with a face full of shame. From her point of view, restoring the ancient transportation formation proved to be quite challenging, and she was quite happy with her recent success. Hanli reached out for the jade talisman. He was extremely happy and had even revealed a rarely seen undisguised smile. Although he didn't intend to immediately make use of the transportation formation, it was bound to be a good backup plan. Hanli submerged his spiritual sense into the jade slip to take a look. As he expected, he saw detailed and complete instructions on the ancient formation's restoration. Thank you for your trouble, young Lady Axion. Hanli didn't drag his thanks into a long-winded speech. Instead, he sincerely said a few words of thanks and carefully put the jade slip away. It was nothing. I personally held much interest in this ancient transportation formation. Axion Ruyan replied with a faint smile. Soon after, she thought of something and took out a small, exquisite storage pouch and handed it over to Hanli. She unhurriedly spoke, I only have another year or 2 to live at most. These are sets of formation flags and plates that elder brother Qi and I refined together. Since I won't be able to use them, I'll give them to Senior Han as a present. I hope it proves useful in assisting Senior Han with his future cultivation. Seeing that Axion Ruyan had given such an impressive gift with such light words, Hanli was left stunned. At that point, he took a deep look at her. After a short moment of silence, he took the storage pouch into his hands and solemnly said, "Although I, Hanli, am not an honorable, kind-hearted, or chivalrous hero, I will promise Aksayan Rian once more that as long as I have the strength, I will thoroughly extinguish the Fu clan from the cultivation world without doubt." Aksayan Rian smiled in response. The purpose of her large gift had been achieved. The more reluctant someone was to make a pledge, the more sincerely they would attempt to uphold it. If Senior doesn't have any pressing matters, he can stay at my humble abode for a few days. I do hope to have a chat with Senior Han about the Tao of Formation spells. 3 days later, Hanli left the nameless mountain on his divine wind boat and arrived at White Pond Mountain, a nearby gathering place for cultivators. Rogue cultivators and cultivator clan members would often gather here to exchange information of the cultivation world and conduct trade as well. Hanli came in order to hear how much the situation had deteriorated in the state of Yu and whether or not the 7 sects were able to make a turnaround. Only after acquiring this information would Hanli be able to decide on his next plan of action. The day of the next cultivator gathering had nearly arrived. White Pond Mountain wasn't far from Aksayan Rian's nameless mountain, and she and Qi Yunxiao had previously went there several times. Naturally, a small meeting such as this would mostly have Qi condensation cultivators. Only rarely would Foundation establishment cultivators appear here. One day later, Hanli arrived at the base of the so-called White Pond Mountain. This mountain was quite large and had 3 peaks. The tallest and most rugged location, the West Peak, was where the meeting would be hosted. Hanli turned into a streak of white light as he shot toward the mountain peak. If such high-grade cultivators wanted to converse, they would normally seek out a higher-class gathering spot. First was due to time as I came here from a desolate mountain where I was cultivating. Recently, I've heard news that the cultivators from my country, the state of Yu, had suffered a huge loss. I felt that the cultivation world was about to undergo great changes, so I thought I'd discreetly look for information. Do you fellow Taoists have the latest information on the Devil Tao and the state of Yu? Hanli gave a simplified explanation. The 4 looked at each other for a moment before 3 of them focused their attention on the shriveled old man among them. The most well-informed is naturally our eldest brother Ding. After all, the Ding clan possesses many secular properties in the state of Yu. The red-faced old man quickly said. The other 2 simultaneously agreed, causing Hanli's eyes to flash with a queer expression. Old man Ding expressed some embarrassment in response. He helplessly said, "Our Ding clan members in the state of Yu have indeed given us information on recent circumstances. Of course, the clan doesn't wish for this information to spread, but since you are all close friends with me and this senior also wishes to know, I can talk about it. However, I hope you all won't easily make this information known." The other 3 couldn't help but grow excited and repeatedly praise him. Even Hanli gently nodded his head. The old man lightly sighed and slowly spoke, "I've just received this information a few days ago. Currently, the state of Yu is in great turmoil. Although the Devil Tao had defeated the 6 sects' allied armies, a large amount of the 6 sects' cultivators have broken off from their retreat out of the state of Yu and have been incessantly launching guerrilla raids utilizing their familiarity of the terrain. I've heard that there were also a few core formation cultivators who haven't retreated, thus keeping the Devil Tao busy. After all, core formation cultivators aren't so easily dealt with. In addition, as the 6 sects have existed in the state of Yu for so many years, they possessed much hidden power and have been causing the Devil Tao's takeover of the state of Yu to be rather troublesome. As for the state of Yu's cultivation clans, they have divided into 3 factions. One faction turned traitor. Once the 6 sects were defeated, they took the initiative to surrender and pay allegiance to the Devil Tao. Another faction consisted of those that were too closely tied with the 6 sects. Fearing that the Devil Tao would want to take revenge, they fled the state of Yu as the 6 sects had. As for the last faction, they are waiting to see how things will develop before taking action. As for the 6 sects' long-established key locations, those from the Masked Moon sect and Giant Sword sect have yet to be broken through by the Devil Dao. The other 4 sects have been completely broken through, but it was said that very little had been obtained from the attacks. A majority of the rare items had been removed by the 6 sects' disciples. The way I see it, every day the Devil Dao isn't able to pacify the state of Yu is another day where the state of Yuanwu or Zijin isn't attacked. After all, their numbers are great and they were able to simultaneously take down 2 small countries and a mid-rank country in one fell swoop. It is only a matter of time before they will fall upon us. Therefore, they have no problem dealing with the disruptive 6-sect cultivators for the time being. The old man's slowly spoken words had revealed his own take on the matter. The red-faced old man couldn't help but interrupt and ask, "Eldest brother Ding, why do you think that the Devil Dao has given us time to breathe, allowing for our country's sects to prepare for their attack?" "This is hard to say. After all, I am only aware of the surface information. As for the absolute truth of the matter, I'm afraid that only the highest echelons of the sects know." Old man Ding slowly shook his head and stole a glance at Han Li. It was obvious that he believed Han Li to be a cultivator from a sect of his own country and had refrained from speaking of certain matters. Old man Ding didn't wish to continue speaking of that issue and suddenly said something with a smile that left Han Li shocked instead. Because the 6 sects of the state of Yu wished for a hasty retreat, they used the strategy of cutting off their own tail. They only brought along their talented elite disciples while leaving the rest of their many disciples as ignorant sacrifices. It is said that the ones who most cruelly applied this tactic were the highest echelons of Yellow Maple Valley's disciples. They had their trusted elite make a smooth escape from the state of Yu while sacrificing 2 whole groups of disciples, nearly all of their cultivators apart from those that escaped. TSK. Their methods are truly impressive. Although the old man said this indifferently, Han Li's heart suddenly sunk, and his face became faintly twisted. But fortunately, the others didn't dare to stare at Han Li for long, so none of them noticed this change. Strongly suppressing his astonishment, Han Li calmly asked, "Fellow Daoist Ding, you said that Yellow Maple Valley sacrificed 2 batches of disciples. How did this happen? I am quite interested." Since Senior is asking, Junior will naturally answer truthfully. "I heard that when the upper echelon of the state of Yu received the news of their frontline's defeat, Yellow Maple Valley immediately plotted to make a crafty escape. They would first have a group of disciples rush to evacuate but secretly divulge this information to the spies of the Devil Dao, claiming that the group contained their elite disciples. This group would also bring along a large amount of spirit stones and materials, completely attracting the attention of the Devil Dao soldiers. At the same time, they left behind another group of ignorant disciples and had them use the Great Formation to confront the Devil Dao. With these 2 groups completely attracting the enemy's attention, Yellow Maple Valley's highest echelon then had the true trusted elite disciples retreat in the opposite direction with the sect's 1,000 years' worth of savings. I heard that although the number of people to safely retreat from Yellow Maple Valley was the fewest, they had the smoothest retreat. As for the other 5 sects, although they retreated en masse, they encountered repeated attacks and had to fight for their lives on many occasions. Much of their valuables have fallen into the Devil Dao's hands as a result. This matter then became widely spread throughout the state of Yu by the Devil Dao. Not daring to slight Han Li, the old man gave him a complete explanation. South of the state of Yu, after passing through the state of Zijin and then another 6 countries, one would arrive at the 9 Nations Union, an inseparably close alliance of 9 countries of various sizes. This alliance between the 9 countries was formed mostly for the purpose of combating their fearsome invaders, the Milan race's spell soldiers. When speaking of the Milan race and their magic soldiers, one wouldn't be able to avoid mentioning the Milan Prairies, home of the Milan tribes and a close neighbor of the 9 Nations Union. The Milan race were completely different from the Yen people of the states of Yuanwu and Yu. Their people were completely nomadic, possessing a culture of fearlessness and a love for brandishing their sabers and spears. The Milan race were made up of countless tribes of various sizes, where small tribes would consist of several 100,000 people and the large tribes would number several tens of millions. Cultivators also existed within these tribes, but they were called spell warriors instead of cultivators. It is said that they are indistinguishable from common cultivators, and the divisions of cultivation as well as the cultivation techniques are extremely similar. The only thing that differed were that the spell warriors of core formation rank and higher didn't care much about external items such as magic tools and talismans. Instead, they were focused on mastering their elemental Daoist magics to perfection. They even had secret earthborn techniques where they merged with the prairie. Their research had produced a variety of extremely strange and formidable magic techniques, and in turn created a new school of magic techniques that distinguished the Milan, which they called spirit techniques. By relying on these incisive, spirit techniques, the Milan race's spell warriors were able to contend and even gain the upper hand against cultivators of equivalent rank. As the Milan race's spell warriors grew increasingly numerous, their need for spirit vein locations and spirit stones intensified to the point of significantly worsening the depletion of cultivation resources. This shortage was further exacerbated by the extreme lack of natural cultivation resources in the Milan prairie. As a result, the Milan race's spell warriors had their gazes set upon the abundant spiritual chi and resources of the 9 countries for as long as anybody could remember. They had often launched attacks against these countries in order to seize their spirit veins, spirit stone mines, and other such resources vital to cultivators. Naturally, the cultivation world of the 9 countries were unwilling to allow their resources to be seized by these savage cultivators. In the end, a bloody war of magic had erupted. In the beginning, the 9 countries had individually resisted, but they had quickly suffered defeat at the hands of the united armies of the Milan tribes, surrendering a large portion of their resources and land. Having now experienced the ferociousness of the Milan, they learned from their defeat and hastily formed the 9 Nations Union. Chapter 359. A surprising encounter with an acquaintance. Having come to a decision, Hanli silently flew off the mountain. Later on, when the White Pond Mountains meeting convened, those chi condensation cultivators that had spoken with Hanli would be left baffled by his absence. Hanli first went to the Heavenly Star Sex Market City to purchase the list of items that he would need to restore the ancient transportation formation. Then, he hurried off to the State of Yu. This time, Hanli didn't take the direct route to enter the State of Yu. Instead, he circled around to a remote part of the border between the State of Yuanwu and Yu and stealthily entered through there. Now that the State of Yu belonged to the Devil Dao, he took steps to avoid entering dangerous territories to prevent having enemies pursuing him the entire way. But Hanli didn't know that because of this precaution, he had unexpectedly avoided a crisis. Currently, the majority of the State of Yu's borders were heavily patrolled. If Hanli had recklessly returned using his original path, he would have been unable to escape their attention, most likely leading to an unavoidable pursuit and battle. Having safely entered the State of Yu, Hanli hastily journeyed on routes through the most desolate areas he could find, allowing him to arrive at the Spirit Stone Mine near the transportation formation unnoticed. Hanli stealthily observed the Spirit Stone Mine from far away, as it had now fallen into the hands of the Devil Dao. He saw Devil Dao disciples wearing green and white clothing with either a dark green ghost skull or a pink peach blossom tucked within the corners of their sleeves. It seemed they were cultivators from the Ghost Spirit sect and the Harmonious Bond sect. Now knowing that the Spirit Stone Mine was being guarded, Hanli stealthily slipped away and entered a nearby secret underground entrance. He was able to easily find the concealed cave he had previously collapsed. After using his magic tools to tear the stone away, Hanli was able to take another look at the damaged ancient transportation formation. He let out a sigh of relief upon seeing the ancient transportation formation safe and sound. During the following day, Han Li first used his newly acquired illusion formation flags to thoroughly conceal the secret location. Afterwards, he laid down the formation flags and formation plates of the 5 elements reversal formation, laying out a thorough defense for the cave containing the ancient transportation formation. This way, he would have enough time to easily escape, even if he was discovered by the Devil Dao cultivators. Freed from worry, Han Li started the transportation formation's restoration. The Jade Talisman clearly stated that restoring the ancient transportation formation required the utmost precision. Even the slightest slant of an unremarkable talisman line could result in an error in the transportation formation. After spending an entire 7 days, Han Li had only managed to complete less than half of the restoration. But that night, Han Li encountered a huge problem. He had already ran out of the supplies he had bought earlier. Han Li was flabbergasted. He had originally bought a bit more than what was mentioned on the item list, but he hadn't accounted for the wasted materials from the mistakes he would make while repairing the formation. He was neither a tool refinement nor a formation spell master. As he was lacking in skill, he had wasted over half of his materials from errors and didn't have enough left to finish. Han Li sighed. It seemed he'd have to go on another trip. However, he remembered that a small market town of some cultivator clan lay several days east of the Spirit Stone mine. Although it wasn't large, items such as source iron and crystal jade could be found there. Since the core of the transportation formation wasn't ruined, he would only require a few common materials to repair it. They had both recognized Han Li, whom they had each attempted to kill before. After glancing at each other in surprise, they charged toward Han Li while using their abilities to the fullest extent without any further hesitation. Wang Chan's blood cloud swelled and expanded to 40 meters wide in an instant. At the same time, its bloody scent grew much more intense and its pressure became astonishingly stronger. The gorgeous man coldly laughed, and a jade flute suddenly appeared in his hand. With a wave, a clear whistle sounded out, transforming his rainbow streak of light into a pink peacock. As he shot toward Han Li, Wang Chan closely followed behind him, unwilling to be second. Seeing that the two were so aggressively chasing him, Han Li finally revealed a trace of panic. He suddenly stomped on his small boat, causing it to release a blinding white light. It lightly trembled as if it were strung on a bough. With the Devil Dao cultivators' astonishing offensive, they had already arrived in front of Han Li and blocked off his path of escape. They now clearly saw that the masked woman had given up her struggle and that her eyes were filled with despair. This caused the two to feel much more at ease. It seemed that the female core formation cultivator no longer had the power to resist. In that moment, Han Li's panicked expression underwent a sudden change, and he revealed a faint, strange smile. When the two outstanding Devil Dao cultivators saw Han Li's expression, their hearts thumped heavily. The scene before them suddenly changed as Han Li and the masked woman turned into a cool breeze as if they no longer existed. Then, 2 huge stones appeared in front of the Devil Dao cultivators, causing them to dodge away in alarm. They couldn't help but look around in astonishment. What they saw caused their complexions to pale. They were surrounded by some kind of forest with countless towering trees similar to stone obelisks. They had been trapped inside of an illusory formation. Wang Chan and the gorgeous man were furious. Although the might of this illusory formation wasn't great, they would have to spend a good amount of time to break through it, giving their prey more than enough time to escape. As a result, these 2 young masters of the Devil Dao developed a bone-deep hatred for Han Li. Senior brother Wang, let's quickly break out of this formation. Don't forget that my junior martial sister Dong is still outside. With her cultivation, she can stall them for a short while. She will give us all the time that we will need. The gorgeous man suddenly thought of something and coldly smiled. Wang Chan's face grew cheerful for a moment, but then he spoke with doubt. "Ah, that's right. It seems this young master has forgotten something. That girl was once a Yellow Maple Valley disciple. Will she really block them? The gorgeous man then revealed some hesitation and replied with uncertainty, she will definitely act. After all, Dong Xianer has a high position in my harmonious bond sept, far greater than the status of an ordinary disciple that she had within Yellow Maple Valley. Furthermore, this father, treat her quite well. Chapter 361, Mishap. As Hanli stomped on his divine wind boat with one arm wrapped around the masked woman, Dong Xianer blocked his way while covered in pink light. Junior Marshal Sister Dong, must you act? Hanli lightly sighed and spoke grudgingly. Her eyes coldly glinted as she glanced down at the unconscious masked woman in Hanli's embrace. Dong Xianer expressionlessly said, Hanli, if you wish to leave, you must first pass through me. I have always been curious as to why my master Hong Fu had insisted on marrying me to you. Also, did you really expect me to allow a masked moon core formation cultivator to easily escape? Dong Xianer's refined brow gradually frowned, and she wore a baleful expression. Once she finished, Hanli didn't reply with words regarding old affection or other such nonsense. After all, he had used formation flags to hastily trap the other two within a simple illusion formation. It wouldn't keep them trapped for long. Hanli's expression sunk and he said, since it's like this, then don't blame me for being ruthless, young lady Dong. Hanli then loudly yelled and waved his hand, releasing 2 black lights and 5 streaks of white light. In addition, a tortoise shell appeared beside him and blocked his front. Afterwards, 4 puppet beasts appeared at both his sides. With gaping mouths, they shot out light beams as thick as a bowl. He took action with the entirety of his power. He didn't have any notion of going easy on the fairer sex. Once Dong Xianer saw Hanli's ferocious offensive, her expression underwent great change. She grit her teeth and waved her flawless hand, summoning a pink muslin cloth. Her hands then emitted a red-orange glow which combined with her muslin cloth to form a huge barrier of sparkling red light surrounding herself. Dong Xianer was convinced that even if Hanli's attack was more overbearing, it still wouldn't be able to break through the powerful barrier created from her fire phoenix cloth and devilish arts. As Dong Xianer was basking in confidence, Hanli's divine wind boat flashed with white light and streaked past her with a whoosh. Likewise, the magic tools that were in an overbearing attack made an immediate turn and quickly flew after Hanli. Without fighting for even a moment, Hanli had instead used his attack as a misdirection, allowing for an immediately escape. This was completely out of Dong Xianer's expectations. She blankly stood in place before her face deeply blushed. Just as she thought to furiously pursue Hanli, the 4 puppet beasts fired light beams on her. Dong Xianer could only wait until after the light beams faded away before hastily withdrawing her light barrier. But by that time, Hanli had already turned into a black dot in the distance and was about to disappear from sight. Naturally, Dong Xianer was unwilling to allow Hanli's trickery succeed. By making use of her wondrous movement technique, she ignored the 4 puppet beasts and set off in hot pursuit. But a short moment later, that black dot in the sky flashed several more times and disappeared without a trace. With a furious expression, Dong Xianer swept the vicinity without finding a single trace of Hanli. She had no choice but to give up her pursuit of them and dejectedly return. At this moment, Hanli was hiding in a loose earth mound to rest. A yellow barrier of light covered Hanli from all sides, but it didn't feel stuffy at all. It was quite fantastic. Hanli hadn't thought that this low-grade earth-sync talisman would prove to be useful someday. It seems that keeping all the talismans he possessed on his body was a correct decision. A moment later, he felt that Dong Xianer had left. Without leaving concealment, he carefully used his spiritual sense and confirmed that Dong Xianer truly wasn't there before leaving the earth mound and speedily flying away. Many hours later, Hanli carried the masked woman into the dry hollow of a large tree. Chapter 363, Transfer. Not long after that, Hanli walked out of the tree hollow and flew off. Hanli was even more cautious this time around. During his entire journey, he used his spiritual sense to its greatest extent. Upon hearing even the wind rustling the grass, he would immediately go into hiding. After all, it would be extremely dangerous to negligently run into a cultivator with his current cultivation. Thus, with paranoid levels of carefulness, Hanli eventually arrived back at his underground cave after taking up nearly twice the time he had been away. Only after he entered his 5 elements reversal formation did he truly let out a breath of relief. As for Crooked Soul, he was still obediently sitting at the side of the formation. When Hanli saw that Crooked Soul had remained in the exact same posture that he had left him in, he couldn't help but smile. Hanli knew that restoring his cultivation wasn't a matter requiring merely 3 or 4 years. As such, he didn't meditate or take any pills to cultivate. Instead, he spent the following days wholeheartedly focused on restoring the ancient transportation formation. Under his current circumstances, traveling to a country far away was much too dangerous. He could only hope that he would be able to use the ancient transportation formation after restoring it. Although Hanli's cultivation had greatly declined, it did not obstruct his restoration work. After a sleepless week, he had completely finished its restoration. Hanli, a normally cool-headed person, felt his heart stir as he looked at the completed ancient transportation formation. He was at the most crucial step with regards to failure or success. He had to test whether another transportation formation was safely connected to his. If the other end of the transportation formation was damaged or if it no longer existed, then it would naturally be of no use. He could only bury his thoughts of using the transportation formation and find another path forward. With that in mind, Hanli calmly placed down low-grade spirit stones one after another on the edge of the transportation formation. When he finished placing the last spirit stones, Hanli hastily took several steps back and couldn't help but look on with bated breath. This ancient formation that was created countless years ago suddenly hummed and flashed with yellow radiance before quickly fading away into darkness. Hanli's heart dropped. Could it be that the ancient transportation formation on the other end was disabled? This would mean that everything he had done was a complete waste. Hanli couldn't help but reveal complete disappointment. But still, he was unresigned. He began walking in circles around the transportation formation with hands behind his back while occasionally muttering to himself. He suddenly stopped and tightly creased his brow as if he had thought of something. He then crouched down and picked up the low-grade spirit stone at the center of the formation. Hanli took a close look at it and let out a breath of cold air. The spirit stone was spent and no longer held any trace of spiritual chi. Hanli revealed a thoughtful expression before suddenly brightening up. Without the slightest hesitation, he took out several sparkling mid-grade spirit stones and exchanged them with the low-grade spirit stones he had placed down before. If he had guessed correctly, the formation didn't activate because low-grade spirit stones provided an insufficient amount of spiritual chi. After placing down the final spirit stone, the transportation formation immediately started to emit a muffled hum before erupting with huge spiritual ripples. A blinding yellow light shot out from the center of the formation spell and shot outside the cave. The 5 elements reversal formation was unable to block it in the slightest. When Hanli saw this, he was stunned. But something immediately came to mind, and his face turned deathly pale. Hanli felt at a loss and couldn't help but turn his gaze towards the old man. The old man naturally understood what Hanli meant. He quickly gave Hanli an explanation. "Great Immortal, this man is Sir Gu, the master of this ship. He intends to invite you to reside as a guest at his residence on the Stalwart Stars Island. He is willing to supply the resources for your cultivation." Stalwart Stars Island. Hanli rubbed his chin and gave a non-committal response. Seeing that Hanli wore an indifferent expression, the middle-aged man became even more fervent and uttered another long string of words. This time, he revealed an apologetic smile. Hanli didn't need the old man's translation to understand why he wanted to invite Hanli to stay on the Stalwart Stars Island. Without waiting for the old man to translate, Hanli bluntly waved his hand and said, "First, tell this ship's master that I am new to this noble land and am unfamiliar with the local conventions. Consequently, I am not able to agree to anything. I will decide whether I want to stay on his Stalwart Stars Island after I am given an explanation. Also, I currently do not understand your language. I hope you will allow me to follow this ship for a few days so that I may learn the local language and a few local conventions from you in passing." Not daring to slight Hanli, he hurriedly gave the middle-aged man a translation. When the middle-aged man heard Hanli, he revealed obvious disappointment. But still, he respectfully saluted Hanli and loudly yelled a few words behind him. Suddenly, everyone on the bow withdrew from the deck like a swarm of bees. After giving the old man his reply, he also withdrew. As such, only Hanli and the old man remained at the ship's bow. The old man smiled to Hanli and said, "Immortal Master, Master Gu has agreed to your request. In addition, he has given you a room on the ship. Please follow me." Hanli agreed, indifferently nodding his head. As such, Hanli and Crooked Soul followed the old man, Wang Changqing, into the ship. "It's certainly large." That was Hanli's first thought upon entering the ship's hold. The ship's hold had paths and corridors in every direction and an unknown number of rooms. Whenever a mortal saw Hanli, they revealed reverent expressions and made way for Hanli. After several turns, Hanli and Crooked Soul arrived at a comparatively large wooden door. Wang Changqing pushed open the door without any hesitation and stepped to the side, inviting Hanli to enter first. Hanli didn't bother being polite and entered the room with Crooked Soul in tow, taking a look around afterwards. The room was quite decent. Not only was it quite large, it also didn't feel stuffy at all. But what Hanli felt was most strange was a small odd tree in a flower pot in the corner of the room. The tree was perfectly straight and was completely branchless with palm-sized triangular leaves growing all over it. In addition, the entire tree glittered with silver light as if it were made out of pure silver. Upon seeing the tree, Hanli revealed great curiosity. When the old man saw Hanli's amazement, he respectfully gave Hanli an explanation. "It seems that Immortal Master hasn't seen a silver-angled tree before. It really is an uncommon rarity. Not only is it a gorgeous sight, it freshens and cleans the air when placed inside. It is a seldom-seen treasure for seafarers. It is only because our ship master is such an domineeringly rich man that he was able to acquire 4 of them." Hanli faintly smiled but remained silent. How could he not make out that this Wang Changqing was trying to curry favor on the ship master's behalf? Hanli had Crooked Soul guard the door and sat down in the room's chair. Wang Changqing reservedly stood at Hanli's side, not daring to sit down as he pleased. Hanli smiled from seeing his restraint and amiably said, "Mr. Wang, there is no need to be so formal. Please take a seat. There are a few things that I'd like to discuss with you." Wang Changqing repeatedly stated that he didn't dare to in a manner of reverence and trepidation. Hanli wrinkled his brow in response and didn't press him any further. After a short moment of thought, he straightforwardly asked, "I am a cultivator that came here from another land. I was wondering if Mr. Wang could give me an introduction to the nearby regions and customs. Naturally, the more that you can tell me about matters pertaining cultivators, the better. I will certainly give this elderly man my thanks." As Hanli spoke, his expression was tranquil as can be. Wang Changqing pondered for a moment before slowly saying, "Since Immortal Master came from a foreign land, then I must first tell you that this place is the Scattered Star Sea. We are in the southwest quadrant of this area. The three great islands nearby are the Tail Star Island, Stalwart Star Island, and Sang Star Island. Naturally, there are also many islands of smaller sizes with both cultivators and mortals living on each. We share the same conventions as those of other territorial waters. Every island has an island lord, a cultivator with the greatest magic power that is responsible for protecting the island. If other cultivators wish to settle on the island and are willing to hold an office, they will be given a set amount of spirit stones from the island lord every year, but they must obey the island lord's commands. Naturally, if one were to reside on an island and was unwilling to hold an office, they would be required to give the island lord a set amount of spirit stones every year if they wished to remain on the island. With that said, Wang Chongqing paused, revealing an expression of admiration as if he held great longing towards cultivators. Chapter 366, Master Gu's Business. Wang Chongqing continued, mortals that live on these islands must perform labor or pay spirit stones, otherwise, they aren't allowed to reside on the island. Because of the immortal techniques that were placed on these islands, there is no need to fear assault from heavenly winds or demonic beasts. As such, us mortals may live without fear. In addition, the immortal master's powers are remarkable. Whenever us mortals travel afar, we spare no effort to hire one or two immortal masters to accompany us. That way, if we come across any demonic beasts while at sea, we will have a chance at living. Naturally, the immortal masters that agree to be hired would be comparatively free when compared to those previously mentioned. Heavenly Wind. Han Li was puzzled upon hearing those words. He knew about demonic beasts, but hadn't heard of this heavenly wind before. The previous land that immortal master resided in didn't have attacks by heavenly wind. The old man appeared to be marveled. I saw no heavenly winds where I previously cultivated. What are they? Something comparable to demonic beasts? Han Li calmly asked without care. Although Wang Chongqing felt doubtful, he still gave Han Li a sincere explanation. Heavenly winds, demonic beasts, and ghost mists are known as the three great natural disasters in the scattered star seas. There is no need to speak of demonic beasts. Immortal Master surely knows about them more than I, but it should be known that most of the demonic beasts of the sea are beyond huge and are proficient in water attribute demonic techniques. Us mortals have no way of dealing with them. Only immortals are able to strike them down. As for heavenly winds, they are hurricanes that occur twice a year that sweep through the entirety of the scattered star seas. The areas it passes suffer from monstrous sea waves, destroying lives and shelters. If we were not on an island protected by immortal techniques, us mortals would face certain doom. It is also said that if an immortal were to be dragged into a heavenly wind, it would be extremely difficult to escape, and they would likely die within. Wang Chongqing appeared fearful as he said this. And the ghost mist? What kind of natural disaster is that? Han Li expressionlessly continued his questions. He wanted to understand these three natural disasters clearly, so that he would be better prepared if he happened to come across them. The old man paused for a moment before continuing. He was truly shocked that the cultivator before him truly knew nothing about the circumstances of the sea or the most mysterious of the three greatest natural disasters, the ghost mist. Where was this cultivator from? Could it be that he came from a place of dry land? But this place was the scattered star seas. Apart from the nearby sea territories, there were no large territories of land to speak of. Restraining his bafflement, Wang Chongqing continued to give Han Li an explanation, not daring to neglect him. The ghost mist is the most fearful and mysterious of the natural disasters of the scattered star seas. It is a black mist that often drifts erratically across the sea. Any life trapped within that black mist will not escape from it. If mortals see it, their death is already decided. As for cultivators, they are no exception either. If cultivators see it, it will be far too late for them to escape as well. Although this mist is terrible, it only appears at certain locations. It never approaches the larger islands. So long as one takes precaution, it is possible to preserve one's life. As a result, this particular natural disaster has killed the fewest people despite being the most fearsome. The old man revealed some joy as he spoke. Hanli sunk into thought after he heard this. What kind of cursed place is this? According to what was said, my plan of finding a small island with spiritual chi to cultivate in seclusion is worthless. Otherwise, I might run into the heavenly wind or ghost mist and meet a miserable end. Having seen that Hanli appeared displeased, the old man became apprehensive. Could it be that I've said something to offend the great immortal? While the old man was anxious, Hanli muttered to himself before asking, that Master Gu from before, why does he want me to go to his residence on Stalwart Star Island? Also, where is this boat currently heading? Hanli stared at the old man with a face revealing neither joy nor anger. The old man's heart thumped when he saw Hanli's indifferent expression and he couldn't help but hesitate. How could Hanli not see that there was something wrong? He eased up his expression, saying, Mr. Wang, be at ease. I am only asking this to clearly understand the present circumstances. After all, I can't just casually agree to Master Gu's request without knowing anything. If I only have to help with a few minor errands, I wouldn't mind taking a trip to Stalwart Star Island. Wang Changqing knew that he could no longer stay silent, else, he would greatly offend this immortal and be certain to face a bitter outcome. Thus, after a dry cough, he smiled and spoke while trembling, this old man begs immortal master to not blame him. In truth, this matter wasn't meant to be concealed. It was just that immortal master hadn't asked. Hanli sardonically rolled his eyes in his mind when he was given these evasive words. Still, the old man tactfully gave an immediate explanation of the situation. Originally, this ship had just finished making a trip for business and was en route to return to Stalwart Star Island. As for Master Gu, he was not born and raised on Stalwart Star Island, but from one of Stalwart Star Island's subsidiary islands instead. But after he became prosperous from business, he had recently decided to move to Stalwart Star Island. The truly lucrative business involved traveling to large, faraway islands, which only mortals of Stalwart Star Island were capable of doing. Mortals that were born on the main island and those born on subsidiary islands held differing statuses. Master Gu's business was originally reselling goods among the subsidiary islands. Only after moving to the main island did he take his business a step further. But after they arrived on the main island, Master Gu made an astonishing discovery. The business of long-distance trading between the great islands wasn't something one could casually participate in. This business had been previously allocated to a set number of parties. Only 10 clans on the island were able to participate in this extremely lucrative business. In addition, these 10 clans were not fixed and unchanging. They were decided in a magic battle that was held every 3 years. If a clan wishes to step into this business, they must request an immortal to undergo this competition. Only with their immortal's victory in the challenge would they be able to acquire the permit to conduct trade between the great islands. When Master Gu learned of this, he lost his head from panic. Because he had previously only performed short-distance trade, he had never hired any cultivators as there was no threat from demonic beasts. As a result, he knew pathetically few cultivators. He originally intended to wait until he had acquired a business and slowly amassed the large sum required to hire one. But now, it was far too late. He had received this information close to the date of the next 3-year magic battle. He couldn't possibly have the time to look for a cultivator to hire. Although there were many cultivators at Stalwart Star Island, a majority of them were proud and arrogant. Only a pitiful few were willing to enter employment under a mortal, and most of them would only lend their assistance if they had some relation beforehand. As for the 10 cultivators he was somewhat acquainted with, they found it embarrassing to participate in the challenge. Running short on time, Master Gu was unable to find any willing cultivators on Stalwart Star Island. Without any better option, he took a trip to deliver goods back to the island he was born on, and he took advantage of that opportunity to ask for the assistance of a distant relative who had some relation to a cultivator. But he truly didn't expect that this particular cultivator had left on a distant journey. Master Gu had been truly left dumbstruck. But now, Hanli, a foreign cultivator, had entered his boat. Having finally found a cultivator despite his previous disconcerting failures had left Master Gu overjoyed. Although he didn't know the level of Hanli's cultivation, it was better than being forced to give up and wait for another 3 years. Therefore, he had previously attempted to rope Hanli in at all costs and have Hanli fight on his behalf. Having heard this, Hanli was left completely speechless. When he heard that cultivators were hired by mortals to go to sea, he found this unbelievable. But now having heard that cultivators fought magic battles on behalf of mortals for the qualifications to do trade between large islands, Hanli was temporarily at a loss for words. It seemed that although cultivators in this area were an aloof and remote crowd, they did not feel that it was beneath their dignity to work under mortals. Instead, it seemed that mortals and cultivators shared some sort of tangled relationship here. However, he'd rather avoid participating in a magic battle for Master Gu's long-distance trade qualifications. He was not so desperate for pay. But he still felt somewhat uncertain. With a faint smile, he slowly asked, "Mr. Wang, I am truly inexperienced. I still have something I must consult with you about. If there is anything Immortal Master does not understand, please ask." This old man will do his best to answer. The old man respectfully replied with haste. "I find myself at a loss. If one wanted to carry goods between islands, why would they have ordinary mortals ferry them across the sea? Are immortals unwilling to use their storage pouch and other such magic tools? Isn't flying both faster and safer?" But then they immediately realized that this great immortal had invited them in. They hastily tidied up their clothes before respectfully entering the room. At this moment, Hanli had already gotten off the bed and was now standing with his hands behind his back. "Great Immortal, Master Gu wishes to personally discuss this matter with you. Could Great Immortal please give Master Gu an opportunity?" Wang Changqing had previous contact with Hanli and knew that this immortal wasn't someone to be deceived. Thus, he directly stated his business for coming. Hanli first glanced at the old man. Then he smiled and said indifferently, "Of course he can. But you should first advise Master Gu to not set his hopes too high." Wang Changqing revealed slight embarrassment, but he gave an honest explanation to the middle-aged man regardless. The middle-aged man's face blanked upon hearing this. But immediately after, the middle-aged man said something that first startled Wang Changqing before causing him to reveal a queer expression. Hanli watched detachedly from the side and remained expressionless. "Great Immortal, our Master Gu says that so long as you lend your assistance, the Gu clan will bestow a large sum of spirit stones to you, regardless of whether this matter results in victory or defeat. If you truly manage to win the rights for the Gu clan to perform trade between the Great Islands, Master Gu is willing to even become your guarantor, allowing a foreign cultivator such as yourself to become an official resident of Stalwart Star Island. Most of all, the Gu clan is willing to respectfully offer 3/10 of the 3-year trading profits to you, even if you do not wish to take up an official position at Stalwart Star Island." Once Wang Changqing said this, his gaze became dim as if he found Master Gu's offer to be incredulous. Hanli was somewhat surprised and stroked his chin. Baffled, he asked, "What? In order to live at Stalwart Star Island, one needs a guarantor. I never heard you say this." Although Hanli's words were mild, Wang Changqing broke out in a cold sweat and hastily explained, "Immortal Master misunderstands. Foreign immortals at Stalwart Star Island can be divided into 2 types. One type is there for a temporary stay. They are unable to hold office and generally live there for a few years, leaving or staying depending on their own preference. The other type have guarantors from the great nearby clans and are able to stay as long as they wish. Not only do they have to pay less spirit stones to stay on the island and have the ability to follow the formalities to obtain a permanent residence, but they also have the qualifications to hold office and have the right to participate in the decennial Great Spirit Land contest. Depending on one's performance in the contest, they are given land with a corresponding density of spiritual chi. This old man neglected to mention this to you because finding a guarantor for a foreign cultivator on an island as large as Stalwart Star Island is an exceedingly complicated matter. Fearing that Hanli would misunderstand, Wang Chongqing explained this all in a single breath. Hanli's expression became gloomy afterwards. Hanli doubtfully asked, "What happens to those cultivators who aren't able to find a residence on Stalwart Star Island? Are they unable to acquire a place to cultivate?" The old man replied, "Of course not. Those immortals from subsidiary islands are able to participate in the competitions. However, they can only participate in the main island's contest in order to obtain places of cultivation. As for why Stalwart Star Island is the main island, that is because the island has the best spirit veins and densest spiritual chi in the local sea. The other islands possess greatly inferior spirit veins in comparison." With all this information, Hanli's expression incessantly switched between clear and gloomy. These rules were an obvious tactic for the cultivators of the main island to ensure they held higher cultivation. All cultivators wanted a cultivation area that held great spiritual chi. Regardless of whether they were nurturing spiritual herbs or cultivating, it was always better to have a place with denser spiritual chi. Hanli tightly tensed his brow and paced back and forth with a lowered head. He then raised his head and turned to look at the middle-aged man surnamed Gu, who held an expectant expression. Seeing that Master Gu held such a hopeful expression, Hanli sighed and slowly said, "Please inform me about the cultivation levels of the other cultivators that will be fighting. If I can handle them, I will make an exception and fight on your behalf." Hanli revealed a helpless appearance. Wang Chongqing became overjoyed and hastily gave the middle-aged man a translation, causing him to become rapt with joy. Afterwards, Hanli inwardly mused, "If those cultivators aren't foundation establishment, by relying on my puppets and incisive magic tools, I should be able to win without a problem, even with my current meager cultivation. As such, I should still be able to cultivate the 3 essence revolutions technique. Naturally, I'll also want to cultivate that external reincarnation technique and great development technique. They should prove to be effective life-saving measures." 4 days later, a large cheer echoed throughout the huge ship. They had finally reached Stalwart Star Island. Hanli followed the lead of Master Gu and Wang Chongqing as they excitedly handled the formalities on the island for Hanli. After all, an unfamiliar cultivator to the island must be reported at the docks in order to avoid being mistaken for a malicious intruder. As Hanli followed after the two, he silently sized up the entire port. He was left with the impression that it was truly grand. Regardless of the quantity or size of the ships, it was fundamentally incomparable to any of the small ports from the Heavenly South region. Unexpectedly, there were 7 other remarkably huge ships similar to Master Gu's ship already moored at the port. Smaller ships naturally numbered many times more. Although Hanli didn't count carefully, he estimated that about 300 ships were docked at the harbor. As for the crowd of people bustling about the harbor and ships, it was far more than that. This was the first time that Hanli saw what he thought to be an ocean of people. Chapter 368, Farmstead. But as Hanli was counting the number of mortals, he also felt the faint aura of several cultivators. It seemed these cultivators were in charge of maintaining order at the port. As Hanli was thinking this, he and Crooked Soul were brought to a stone room inside the harbor. The room was very simply decorated with only a wooden desk and a chair with a wrinkly old man sitting in it with his eyes shut. Upon hearing Hanli and company enter, this immortal opened his eyes. A cold light suddenly shot out as his eyes opened. Hanli's heart shuddered upon seeing it. This person was unexpectedly a Foundation establishment cultivator. In addition, his magic power was no less than Hanli when he had been at his peak. This wrinkly, yellow-faced old man ignored Master Gu and Wang Chongqing and directly swept his gaze toward Hanli and Crooked Soul. After seeing that Hanli was only a qi condensation cultivator, his expression became lazy once more. But after he took note of Hanli, he seemed to have glanced at Crooked Soul several more times. If you have business, be quick about it. Otherwise, don't interrupt my rest. He spoke dispiritedly and displayed some impatience. By relying on his highly retentive memory, Hanli had acquired a rough understanding of the local language from Wang Chongqing. Although he couldn't speak it, he could understand the meaning of others with some difficulty. But since he didn't have any experience interacting with the cultivators of this land, he didn't say a word and only smiled as Master Gu and Wang Chongqing spoke with the cultivator. Master Gu respectfully addressed him as Immortal Yang. Then he moved closer to him and whispered something before turning around and pointing at Hanli. It seemed he was explaining his origins. Afterwards, he placed a few spirit stones in his hand. Grasping the spirit stones in his hand, Immortal Yang's expression greatly eased up. He then took out a green jade medallion and stiffly asked Hanli, "Your name?" "Hanli." Hanli was able to say his own name fluently. As for how the other party would write them, he didn't care in the least. Immortal Yang's hand flashed with green light, enveloping the entire jade medallion. After a short moment, the radiance faded away, revealing two strange symbols that Hanli hadn't seen before. The yellow-faced old man then tossed the jade medallion towards Hanli. "Properly put away the medallion. If you lose it, you must immediately come back here and receive a replacement. Otherwise, you will face punishment as a trespasser on Stalwart Star Island. Naturally, if you settle down here later, you will no longer require the jade medallion and can return it. As for that refined corpse behind you, it obviously doesn't need one." After saying this with a raspy voice, he no longer paid them any attention and closed his eyes once more. Master Gu tactfully left at once. However, Hanli seemed interested in how he saw the Crooked Soul's true identity with a single glance. After taking a good look at him, Hanli silently left the room. Shortly after Hanli left, that Immortal Yang opened his eyes once more. He muttered to himself with slight bewilderment, "That refined corpse is truly odd. It is clearly a dead body, but it still releases spiritual qi. Could it be some sort of new corpse refinement technique?" The old man then sunk into a long period of contemplation. After leaving the port, Master Gu hired a carriage being pulled by strange ox-like goats, quickly bringing them deeper into the island by traveling along a large road. Along the way, there were countless similar vehicles going about their own business. But once the carriage passed through several small, bustling towns, they saw far fewer carriages. As they traveled along a few small roads, pedestrians and carriages became exceedingly sparse. After hurriedly traveling for half a day, the carriage finally arrived at a farmstead that occupied over 2 acres. The farmstead grew many odd crops that Hanli hadn't seen before. There were crops that resembled grains and rice. However, their leaves were thick, flat and of a violet-red color. There were also crops that resembled cabbage. They released a faint scent, and although it possessed an extremely similar appearance to cabbage, there were no such cabbages that were as tall as half a man in the heavenly south region. There was even choice some that bloomed small blue flowers. More than 10 farmers could be seen at each vegetable field. They were toiling at the fields in groups of 2 and 3. This provided quite a serene view of the farmstead. As Hanli gazed at the farm with interest, the carriage had arrived at the large entrance of the farmstead's manor and stopped. Hanli brought Crooked Soul out with him and took a look around. The manor was surrounded by green pine trees and neighbored a rather large hill. It appeared somewhat unusual, but could be considered to be quite tasteful with a serene environment. In addition, the manor was surrounded by earth walls 6 meters tall and 1 meter thick. Many houses lied within the walls, appearing to have been built recently. So this is the Gu clan. Hanli silently uttered a word of praise. But as he carefully examined the pines, his expression inadvertently changed because of an astonishing discovery. The trees that surrounded the manor faintly revealed the aura of a formation spell. It was obvious that a restriction had been placed here. Although Hanli didn't view the formation spell to be exceptional by any means, it was still enough to trap a low-level cultivator. While Hanli was feeling somewhat suspicious, Master Gu got off the carriage and spoke with an apologetic smile. "Immortal Han, please take a rest at the manor. I'll call for some subordinates to prepare some of the island's specialty wine for the Immortal Master." Hanli took a random glance at the surroundings of the manor and replied with a smile, "Let it be. I don't wish to disturb Master Gu's home. It'll be fine if I reside there for the time being. After our affairs have been handled, I will search for a more permanent residence." Hanli then pointed in a direction off to the side. Master Gu and Wang Chongqing followed the direction Hanli was pointing to and saw that it was a small solitary hill. They couldn't help but be dumbstruck. But after seeing that their many enthusiastic invitations had failed, they could only allow this strange immortal to head towards the small hill. They gave each other a mutual glance of helplessness before walking into the manor. Hanli brought Crooked Soul with him on the small, sloped path towards the hilltop. He then took a glance down at the Gu clan manor from above. He saw that Master Gu was heading towards the huge residence at the center of the manor while being escorted by a crowd of women and men. By the time he had arrived there, most of them have dispersed. Only a few beautifully clothed individuals followed him into the manor. Hanli smirked slightly and turned around, busying himself with his own affairs. He first went to find a relatively flat and even piece of land at the back of the hill. Then he quickly uprooted several of the thicker pines and cut them into pieces with magic tools. Afterwards, he had Crooked Soul. An hour later, he had completed a simple small wooden house on the hill. The house had a wooden table, wooden chairs, and even a wooden bed. In the following month, Hanli stayed in his house every day, taking medicinal pills and refining qi, striving to restore his cultivation as soon as possible. As for Master Gu and Wang Chongqing, they visited several times during this period and discussed matters pertaining to the contest. Afterwards, they hurriedly left, not daring to further disturb Hanli's cultivation. But as Master Gu was a sensible person, he sent delicacies up to Hanli's home every few days for his enjoyment. Hanli gladly accepted them without a trace of politeness. Many kinds of exceptionally sweet fruits were among these offerings, much to Hanli's enjoyment. They were clearly the island's local specialties since he had never seen them before. During the last few days of the month, Hanli had managed to restore his cultivation to the 5th layer of qi condensation. He found this very surprising and felt his heart become more assured. According to Master Gu, none of the cultivators that the 10 clans had requested possessed a high level of cultivation. Apart from a few exceptions, a majority of them only possessed a cultivation at the 6th or 7th layer of qi condensation. As for the lots which would decide the fights, so long as Hanli's luck wasn't exceptionally terrible, he wouldn't have a problem in the contest. In addition, Master Gu had scoured the nearby seas for 3 impressive magic tools to increase Hanli's odds of success. Hanli barely classified these items as high-grade magic tools. He could only roll his eyes inwardly and accept them so that Master Gu would feel at ease. 2 days after Hanli restored the 5th layer of his cultivation, Master Gu and Wang Chongqing paid Hanli a visit with nervous expressions. Hanli wordlessly entered their carriage drawn by strange beasts, and they hurriedly traveled to some area located at the center of the island. 4 hours later, they arrived at a city that seemed to be entirely constructed out of white stone. As they entered the city, they saw a large amount of mortals guarding the city entrance. They wouldn't bother anyone leaving the city, but entering the city would require one to show a command medallion, similar to the one Hanli possessed. But when Hanli was about to enter the city, the guards took out a cylindrical object and shook it at Hanli several times. After it shined with a green light, they gave Hanli a respectful salute and moved to only inspect the medallions of Master Gu and Wang Chongqing. May I ask if Senior is in charge of this matter? The middle-aged man lightly sighed before spiritedly asking, taking up residence. Do you have a guarantor? I do. Hanli immediately took out the document that the Gu clan member had given him and stepped forward to give it to the man. Hanli didn't dare to belittle him as his spiritual power fluctuations clearly revealed his status as a powerful late Foundation establishment cultivator. The middle-aged man took the signed document from Hanli and swept through it. His eyes then flashed with bright light, sizing Hanli up. Caressing the pearl in his embrace, the middle-aged man indifferently asked, I have heard that there was a new cultivator on the island that was able to defeat a member of the Protector Squad while at the 5th layer of Qi condensation. Could that have been you? Hanli was somewhat surprised, but he hastily replied with a modest tone, Junior only won through a fluke. It wasn't really like that. Humph. A fluke, the middle-aged man snorted with a cold smile. Hanli inwardly frowned and felt puzzled, the battle only took place several days ago. How does this person know about it? The middle-aged man tightened the demon furs on his body as if he saw the confusion in Hanli's mind and calmly said, That person you defeated from the Protector Squad is my unbecoming disciple. Having lost to someone with a lower cultivation than himself, I've sentenced him to secluded study as punishment. Hanli bitterly smiled after being stunned for a moment as this was far too coincidental. Hanli became somewhat worried. Could it be that he intended to teach Hanli a lesson on behalf of his disciple? The middle-aged man squinted at Hanli and spoke with an icy tone, Don't worry. This is a matter between you juniors, and I won't take advantage of you as your senior. I hope that you will fight my unbecoming disciple one more time. After that, I won't pursue the matter any further, regardless of the outcome. Hanli felt his heart relax. Since it is Senior's request, Junior naturally will not refuse. The middle-aged man was surprised to see Hanli so willingly consent, but soon after, he revealed a satisfied expression. The middle-aged man's hand flashed with white light and the pearl disappeared. He then stood up and slowly said, Next, I will be handling the matters of your residency. The formalities for residency were actually quite simple. The middle-aged man merely took out a golden book and wrote Hanli's name in it. Hanli also exchanged the green jade medallion he had received from the harbor for a blue jade pendant. The jade pendant twinkled with blue light and was a low-grade magic tool. According to the middle-aged man, the pendant possessed minor waterproofing effects. The effect was quite practical. Next, the middle-aged man tossed a silver booklet towards Hanli. All of the places shining with golden light have already been taken. The white ones are unoccupied. Choose one to be your cultivation area. Cough, cough. After quickly speaking just a few words, he started to cough without end. The middle-aged man seemed to be afflicted with a truly serious illness. But I must warn you that the spirit stones you receive in compensation won't be enough to sustain the daily usage of the defensive formation. The island's spirit stone consumption has been sustained up until now by stalwart Star Island. The middle-aged cultivator lazily pointed out the rule while tapping the bedside. After muttering to himself for a moment, Hanli eventually asked in a soft voice, if I choose that small island, doesn't that mean I would in fact become the island's master? Hee, you could think of it that way. The middle-aged man replied with some surprise. He had already laid out the island's shortcomings. If this youth still wanted to choose that island, it was none of his business. The middle-aged man thoughtfully sized up Hanley once more and inwardly sneered. He would spend a huge amount of spirit stones before long, and come to complain without end. He was convinced that within 2 years at most, this young cultivator would come back with gray hair and a haggard complexion to choose a new cultivation area. Why else would such a position, being the master of a small island, remain uncontested until now? After some more thought, Hanley spoke without further hesitation. All right, this junior will pick the minor expanse island. Having heard that Hanley was certain, the middle-aged cultivator didn't hesitate. He took out a golden brush and lightly dabbed the island on the map. The island's white light immediately turned golden. He then searched his robes for a jade slip which he then wrote a few characters on with his golden brush before tossing it to Hanley. Hanley lowered his head to look at the jade slip and saw that there were 2 golden characters on it. They seemed familiar, as if it were his name written in the local characters. This jade slip is evidence that Minor Expanse Island is your cultivation area and contains the names of the island's inhabitants. Make sure to hold on to it properly, the middle-aged man indifferently said. Afterwards, he put away the booklet and laid back down on the stone bed. He then waved his arm at Hanley, obviously shooing him away. Hanley gave him a quick salute before tactfully leaving. Exiting the Immortal Records Pavilion, Hanley had no inclination to sightsee around the Azure Cloud Mountains or meet other cultivators. Instead, he directly flew back to the Gu clan estate. On the morning of the next day, Hanley left a letter for Master Gu on the desk in his room. Then he brought Crooked Soul with him to the closest village and bought a map of Stalwart Star Island and its nearby territories before heading straight towards the harbor. Wang Changqing had told Hanley previously that the island's largest city, Stalwart Star City, was located in the western part of Stalwart Star Island. That city had a street called All Sky Street where cultivators traded items. Chapter 373, External Reincarnation. The Soul Village on this small island was at the east end, near its port. In the west was a small mountain range of about 10 kilometers with only 2 small mountains. The higher mountain was about 1 kilometer tall, while the shorter one was only about 400 meters tall. Hanley gazed at the mountains from afar before suppressing the excitement in his heart, deciding to pay a visit to the village first. Hanley's and Crooked Soul's arrival caused quite a stir. An old man, the self-proclaimed village head, immediately stepped forward to see Hanley. After letting the old man inspect the gold symbols on the jade slip, the village head immediately declared that the entire village must obey the Great Immortal's orders. Naturally, Hanley didn't have any use for the assistance of mortals. Instead, he asked about the issues he was most concerned with, the general circumstances of the island and the amount of spirit stones the villagers were able to contribute towards maintaining the island's protective formation. After hearing that the amount added up to almost nothing, Hanley became somewhat gloomy. Didn't this mean that he had to contribute all of the spirit stones? That middle-aged man said the residents would be contributing a portion of spirit stones consumed by the protective formation. It seemed like those were merely pleasant words. Their help wouldn't amount to anything. Hanley inwardly cursed at the middle-aged cultivator, but spoke a few reassuring words to the old man. He estimated the amount of spirit stones required and compared it to the old man's estimate of their contribution. Hanley then gave the old man a year's worth of spirit stones to sustain the formation spell. He then told the old man that, in the coming years, he could go to his immortal's cave and pick up the spirit stones required for that year. Then, without paying attention to the old man's repeated thanks, Hanley and Crooked Soul flew towards the island's west side. Once Hanli entered the mountain range known by the island's inhabitants as the Minor Expanse Mountains, he was whelmed by the feeling of faint spiritual qi, causing his heart to stir. A short moment later, Hanli was standing at the front of his divine wind boat as he circled both mountain peaks. It was obvious that the spiritual qi was richer on the higher mountain peak, but the lower mountain peak was thicker and more solid. Not only was it more suitable for an immortal's cave, it was also the site of a previous cultivator's immortal's cave. The present immortal's cave was intact and undamaged. It seemed suitable for immediate occupation. Hanli sunk into thought for a moment on his divine wind boat. His eyes then flashed with spirited light, and he came to a decision. He first flew towards the thicker, shorter mountain peak and entered the deepest, most secretive area of the immortal's cave. Afterwards, he fiercely struck the ground with his magic tools. Half a day later, the initial makings of an underground passage had been created. It had a 9-meter diameter and headed straight towards the base of the mountain. But when Hanli's passage had reached a dozen meters below the mountain's base, he suddenly changed direction towards the base of the other mountain over a kilometer away. Although Hanli's magic tool was incomparably sharp, having Crooked Soul's assistance shortened the time required for this massive undertaking to 2 days. After carving out a passage between the bases of the mountains, Hanli carved out a new immortal's cave inside of the taller mountain in the style of his old immortal's cave in the heavenly south region. This new immortal's cave was cut in exactly the same shape as his old one in the Taiyu mountain range, but this time, there was no exit except for the underground tunnel. This would be the place where Hanli would cultivate and grow spiritual herbs. At best, this would result in madness. At worst, he would suffer from qigong deviation and perish. In addition, even if he was successful, the external reincarnation would only be an easily controlled high-level puppet that could cultivate. This was completely different from the rumored ability to split oneself into two, and was inferior to the divine abilities possessed by some cultivator clans. However, Hanli had the 5-element blood cores, and had a great opportunity to create a clone with a fiend core. This was an extremely rare stroke of luck where he could obtain a puppet guard with the strength of a core formation cultivator. Although the puppet would only be considered to be at early core formation, he would still have the power to defend himself against any foundation establishment cultivator. The most difficult and crucial aspect of cultivating a clone was that it required a corpse with spiritual roots. But Hanli was already in possession of a suitable corpse, Crooked Soul, a soulless refined corpse he had acquired long ago. It stands to reason that extracting a cultivator's soul, especially that of a low-grade cultivator, would cause the body's meridians to rupture due to the overbearing nature of the magic technique used, disallowing any further cultivation. This was why so many cultivators viewed Crooked Soul with surprise when they saw that a corpse possessed spiritual qi fluctuations. Although cases where a soul was extracted from a cultivator's body with its meridians intact did exist, there were flukes that wouldn't be encountered even once in 100 times. Unfortunately, this external reincarnation technique required the body to be intact after its soul had been extracted and that the cultivator must be of the 6th layer or lower. Such a suitable corpse would be hard to come by. Although Hanli didn't know why there were such strange requirements, he surmised that it probably had something to do with the ease of controlling the corpse after inserting a thread of spiritual sense into it. Hanli might not know exactly how Yuzitong and Dr. Mo created Crooked Soul, but Crooked Soul definitely satisfied all the requirements, making it an exceptionally good candidate for refining a clone. As for the Emperor of Yu, it probably took an unknown amount of dead low-grade cultivators before he happened upon a suitable corpse. Hanli sat cross-legged on the ground and pondered for a long time before deciding to cultivate the Great Development Technique to the 2nd layer prior to refining the corpse. With that accomplished, he wouldn't suffer much damage even if the clone perished. He had a deep understanding of the wondrous effects that the Great Development Technique would have on strengthening his spiritual sense. Before he could cultivate the Great Development Technique, he would first have to recover his foundation establishment cultivation. In order to cultivate the external reincarnation technique, he would even have to cultivate to late foundation establishment. After attempting to refine a clone, regardless of success or failure, Hanli would still have to fumble about with cultivating the 3 essence revolutions. After all, this cultivation art along with the Azure Essence Sword art would be a crucial step along the great path towards core formation stage. Having mentally planned out his future cultivation, Hanli entered a secret room in his immortal's cave and began to refine qi with the aid of medicinal pills. He only took the yellow dragon pill and the gold marrow pill for now, 2 low-grade medicine pills. Taking foundation establishment pills at his current stage would be far too violent for his body. It would be more appropriate to wait until after he had reached the 7th layer of qi condensation before taking them. Without a bottleneck to foundation establishment, Hanli reckoned that he should be able to recover his cultivation relatively quickly. This would compress one's true essence and allow one to draw as close as possible to solidification, weakening the bottleneck to the core formation stage. According to the speculations of the expert who created this cultivation art, after 3 cycles of recultivation, one should have a 50% possibility of forming a golden core. Although Hanli had unexpectedly scattered his cultivation during mid-foundation establishment instead of scattering his cultivation when he reached late foundation establishment, he didn't care in the least. To Hanli, the difference between scattering one's cultivation during mid-foundation establishment instead of late foundation establishment was only a small degree of true essence condensation. With the main idea of true essence compression and solidification still at the center, there shouldn't be any big problems if he were to scatter his cultivation 2 more times from late foundation establishment. After several months of single-minded study of the 3 essence revolutions cultivation art, he came to a full understanding of the cultivation art and entered his hidden room with a large amount of medicinal pills. He had come to a resolute decision that he wouldn't leave his immortal's cave until he finished the first revolutions of his cultivation art and reached the 6th layer of the Azure Essence Sword art. As for Crooked Soul, who was now completely fused with Hanli's spiritual sense, Hanli had tirelessly prepared pre-foundation establishment medicines pills for him. As Crooked Soul had spiritual roots with 3 elements, he had greater aptitude than Hanli, who had false spiritual roots with 4 elements. As a result, Crooked Soul's cultivation speed was insanely fast with the assistance of medicine pills, no slower than Hanli's recultivation speed. According to Hanli estimates, it would only take 2 years for him to reach foundation establishment. In addition, Hanli picked out the devilish art Divine Bloodlight from the jade slip that emitted gray light for Crooked Soul to cultivate after he reached foundation establishment. After all, Hanli had personally seen the might of this devilish art from the Emperor of Yu himself. As for the fact that this art didn't have any continuation for core formation cultivators, Hanli didn't mind much. This was because after Crooked Soul formed a fiend core, Crooked Soul would forever be at early core formation. There would be no difference whether or not there was a continuation of the magic art. Hanli's cultivation session went on for a truly long time. This chapter is meant to be viewed on wuxiaworld.com. It was the same as the common saying, cultivation is timeless. In the mere blink of an eye, over 20 years had passed. During this large expanse of time, Hanli didn't take a single step outside of his immortal's cave, nor did he show himself to the island's inhabitants. Ever since Hanli arrived at Minor Expanse Island, several hundred of its inhabitants would say that he nearly hadn't affected them at all. If they wanted to fish, they fished, if they wanted to farm, then they farmed. Naturally, the inhabitants weren't too comfortable to discover that their 2 mountains were now constantly shrouded in a thick white fog. But after such a long period of time, the villagers became accustomed to the scene and no longer took notice of it. However, the village elder would repeatedly warn the village's mischievous children not to approach the mountain's nearby fog under any circumstances. This was because once someone entered, they would disappear without a trace and couldn't come out. Only after suffering several days of entrapment and shouting out, "Immortal Master Han," several times would they discover a path out. As this matter had occurred several times, the villagers came to understand that Immortal Han disliked having others bother him. Apart from wood chopping and fruit picking, no other affairs were carried out near the Minor Expanse Mountains. As for the yearly expenditure of spirit stones for the protective formation, so long as the village head loudly shouted towards the mountain a few times, the yearly amount of spirit stones would fly out of the white mist on a tray. Those that came for spirit stones never came back empty-handed. Of course, the original village head had passed away during these 20 years. The current village head was the dark-skinned fisherman Hanli had seen when he first arrived at the island, Haegue. However, he still fetched spirit stones in the exact same manner. As such, while the inhabitants of the island weren't particularly loyal towards Immortal Han, they still had a decent impression of him. Then one day, Hanli walked out of his immortal's cave. Under Master Gu's respectful welcome, Hanli entered a huge residence at the center of the Gu estate. After entering a room, Master Gu took the initiative to hand over a large sack of spirit stones to Hanli without waiting for him to say anything. In addition, he gave Hanli a cordial introduction to a few of the young children of the Gu clan. He particularly made an effort to introduce his eldest son, a 30-year-old youth named Gu Kai. How could Hanli not see what the Gu clan master intended? The Gu clan master knew that the end of his life was drawing near, and he wished for Hanli to continue providing some assistance to his clan after his passing. Hanli faintly smiled and said some casual promises for the sake of their past friendship. The Gu clan master felt great joy and immediately called for a feast on behalf of Hanli. However, Hanli tactfully declined. Following, Hanli had a chat with the Gu clan master before swiftly departing from the Gu clan estate. After leaving, Hanli fetched Crooked Soul from the hilltop and flew towards a small, nearby village. Hanli quickly found an inn and spent the night studying the Pill Dao evaluations, without any sleep. On the next day, Hanli had a general understanding about the medicine pills of the scattered star seas. As for the Dustfall pill, he had examined its description several times. In accordance to the book, the Dustfall pill not only required the cores of several uncommon demon beasts, but it also required a large amount of rarely seen spiritual herbs to refine. It was an undoubtedly precious item. The pill really does have the wondrous effect of increasing the odds of core formation. Although the increased odds couldn't be considered to be much and it can only be taken during the formation of one's core, it is seen as a treasure to cultivators on the verge of core formation. To cultivators wishing to form their core, any items capable of raising their odds of success by even a single % were greatly coveted but extremely rare. Nevertheless, Hanli understood that since the 6 palaces were offering this rare medicine pill as payment, the task wouldn't be nearly as easy as maintaining a formation. There would certainly be a large amount of danger if he went, and only the heavens would know what troubles he would encounter. However, Hanli truly thirsted for this Dustfall pill. After all, both he and Crooked Soul were soon facing core formation. Leaving his own poor odds aside, Crooked Soul's Fiend core was said to have a 1/3 chance of core formation. As the probability of failure was so high, he was unable to feel at ease. He needed to acquire the Dustfall pill. After sinking into bitter contemplation for a long while, he eventually came to the decision to face the unknown danger. After all, both he and Crooked Soul were late Foundation establishment cultivators. If any danger arose, he should be able to protect himself without problem. When the formation spell transformations were finally practiced to perfection, Feng Sanyang no longer delayed their journey and had the ship continue on at full speed. 1 month later, the ship arrived at a nameless, desolate island. Led by Feng Sanyang, Hanli and company descended from the ship. Just as they stepped onto the small island, a blinding golden light flew down from the sky, and several people were suddenly hovering above them. Once the light faded away, an old man whose face had a dim, golden sheen expressionlessly glanced at them. This person lacked any noticeable magic power fluctuations despite obviously not being a mortal. It seemed he was able to restrain his unfathomably deep magic power with ease. The appearance of such an expert caused Han Li's heart to tremble. Feng Sanyang stepped forward without hesitation and deeply bowed to the old man and spoke with an expression of respect. Subordinate Feng Sanyang pays her respects to Elder Miao. At that moment, Han Li and the others standing behind her paid their respects as well. They obviously couldn't afford to slight a core formation cultivator. With a calm expression, the old man slowly said, "There is no need to be so polite. Feng Sanyang, you did quite well. You've managed to bring these assistants very quickly. Are they familiar with the formation spell drills? The demonic beast we're dealing with is quite troublesome, and we cannot be careless. Elder, be at ease. Everyone has already fully mastered the many variations of the 6 flowing ripples formation. We will definitely be able to trap the beast." Feng Sanyang's voice brimmed with confidence. Elder Miao swept his gaze over the Foundation establishment cultivators. He then said in a friendly manner, "Good. Fellow Taoists, our 6 united palaces require your assistance. So long as you properly exert yourself, we will treat you fairly without a doubt." Without waiting for the others to speak, the middle-aged Confucian scholar rushed to speak with an ingratiating smile. "Be at ease, senior. We will definitely try our best." Although the others revealed odd expressions upon seeing the Confucian scholar's flattery, they could only express their mutual agreement. Satisfied with their responses, Elder Miao nodded his head and said, "We've already placed down the formation several days ago. You will only have to maintain it. As for Elder Gu, he is in the nearby seas chasing after the demon beast, and I will be joining him after this. I reckon by tomorrow morning, we will be able to draw the beast into the formation and you all will be able to display your skill. You should rest on the island until then." Elder Miao then turned into a streak of gold light and flew into the sky, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Feng Sanyang turned her head over, speaking with a solemn voice, "Fellow Taoists, you've heard Elder Miao. Let's rest for the day and properly prepare ourselves for the hard battle coming tomorrow." The others naturally didn't contest this and nodded their heads. But at this moment, Qing Xuanzi, who seldom spoke on the journey, suddenly said with a stiff voice, "Fellow Daoist Feng, we've all asked what kind of demon beast we would be dealing with along the way. In the end, you never clearly answered us. But now that we will act tomorrow, will you finally give us a clear answer?" The old man's question stirred the hearts of the others, bringing all of their questioning gazes upon Feng Sanyang. This demon beast was apparently terrible and rarely seen, even requiring great efforts and long planning from the 6 united palaces. This definitely wasn't some ordinary grade 6 demon beast. Chapter 380, Infant Carp Beast. When Feng Sanyang heard this, she revealed a bitter smile. She dragged the hair on her forehead to one side and slowly said, "Fellow Taoists. It wasn't that I was unwilling to state the facts. I was under orders to not divulge this information until we arrived on the island. Now that we've arrived, I have no restrictions in telling you all. The foe that our united 6 palaces wish to battle is an infant carp beast. That is why we had to be a bit careful." Infant carp beast. When Qing Xuanzi heard this, he couldn't help but shout out in shock. Han Li detachedly gazed on. Although he didn't know what sort of demon beast they were facing, judging by the pale expressions of the others, it was by no means some trifling beast. I don't blame your palaces for being this careful. If it really is this demon beast, it was right to be careful. If other powers were to know of this, who knows how much of a disturbance would be brought about. Qing Xuanzi muttered in disbelief. Han Li's heart stirred upon hearing him. The youth surnamed Yen and the large bald man's expressions continuously shifted as their hearts were in turmoil. Only the middle-aged Confucian scholar with an unsightly expression coldly spoke to Feng Sanyang, "Your 6 united palaces have overreached themselves. Everyone knows that the infant carp beast is an innate water demon beast with formidable water-type divine abilities. If it were grade 6, it'd be a match for common grade 7 demon beasts. By claiming it to be a grade 6 beast when you were asking for our assistance, were you deliberately trying to take advantage of us?" The middle-aged Confucian scholar asked. Qing Xuanzi and the others eventually recovered from their shock, all revealing their displeasure. Although they were all rogue cultivators, those that walked the road less traveled, they didn't dare to rashly offend the 6 united palaces. They all wordlessly stared at Feng Sanyang, waiting for an answer. Feng Sanyang's face darkened. She replied without a trace of politeness, "Fellow Daoist Mao, you speak wrongly. Our 6 united palaces did not deceive you, unlike a certain monopolistic web novel company. Although the infant carp beast is a bit difficult, it is a genuine grade 6 demon beast. How could you say we called a grade 7 demon beast a grade 6 demon beast? Besides, since our palaces offered a reward as precious as the dustfall pill, you should have understood that you weren't going to deal with a common grade 6 beast. Likewise, we weren't doing something as evil as reposting this series without permission. Otherwise, our palaces would be operating at a loss." The middle-aged Confucian scholar was left dumbstruck for a long while, and Han Li inwardly frowned. Although the woman's outspoken words held reason, he still felt very uncomfortable and couldn't help but glance at the others. The other 3 appeared to have the same attitude as Han Li and revealed slight displeasure. Then, Feng Sanyang suddenly flashed Crooked Soul a smile and said, "Naturally, our palace acted in this manner to ensure that the existence of the infant carp beast is kept hidden. As a result, arrangements were made before we came here. In addition to the dustfall pill you will receive after this matter is concluded, you will all be paid in advance of 1,000 spirit stones as compensation for keeping the matter secret. Is this to your satisfaction?" Everyone's resentment had slowly faded away, and they each nodded their heads in agreement. The middle-aged man still seemed somewhat unsatisfied, but his young, beautiful Dao companion then whispered something into his ear. His expression changed, and he kept silent. Soon after, everyone went off in their own direction on the island and found a quiet location to meditate and rest. Han Li and Crooked Soul found a huge reef near the ocean shore and sat down cross-legged while facing each other. At the same time, the golden light enveloping him turned into a golden rainbow and disappeared in an instant. The huge white mist chasing after them appeared upset by this, and the infant's weeping became even more intense. The sound gradually changed to that of thunder and became increasingly deafening. Not good. The beast is going to use divine water star thunder. Elder Brother Gu, please hurry. Elder Miao, now enveloped by the yellow light, shouted out as if he were greatly fearful of the sounds of thunder from behind them. Be at ease. My immemorial bowl isn't slow in the slightest. Just as the deep voice said this, the yellow light sped up and greatly increased the distance between them and the white mist in an instant. However, the white mist seemed unwilling to give up. With sounds of wailing and thunder, it also sped up, cutting through the seawater and spreading huge white waves across the ocean as far as the eye could see. Crooked Soul and company had already taken their positions at the formation's front, each holding a large blue flag in their hand. The banner was about 6 meters long and emitted threads of dazzling blue radiance. The 6 late Foundation establishment cultivators wore solemn expressions and were separated by over 400 meters as they floated above the sea on magic tools, forming a hollow semicircle. Han Late stood behind Crooked Soul with a detached gaze. As for the middle-aged Confucian scholar's Tao companion, she stood at his side with a concerned expression. A short moment later, a streak of golden light suddenly cleaved through the sky and arrived in Feng Sanyang's hand, drawing the attention of the others. Everyone, on guard. The infant carp beast is about to come. Once the beast enters the formation, immediately block off the entrance of the formation. Feng Sanyang received the message and loudly shouted to the others with a solemn expression. Afterwards, the golden light flew away and disappeared off into the sky. Han Li's heart tensed, and he attentively stared in the direction that the golden light flew off into. The others also wore taut expressions as if they were anticipating the storm that was about to come. After an unknown amount of time passed, they heard faint rolls of thunder in the distance that soon grew increasingly louder. They eventually spotted a streak of yellow and a streak of golden light flying towards them at the speed of lightning. A huge white mist followed behind them as if it were closely pursuing them. That's the infant carp beast. Although Han Li could clearly see a huge white mist behind the streaks, he couldn't imagine the sinister appearance of the demon beast concealed within. Chapter 381, Rare Treasures Conquer the Demon, Initiate the Spell Formation. Feng Sanyang loudly yelled as she waved the blue banner in her hands, causing blue circular ripples to suddenly flow from the banner. The others followed suit, silently waving their formation flags. In an instant, a blue brilliance enveloped all of them. After several flashes of light, they all disappeared without a trace. From a distance, only an empty sea could be seen where they once were. A moment later, 2 streaks of light flew past this area without any intention of slowing down, as if they were truly fleeing for their lives. The white mist behind them closely followed after them without a single shred of doubt. As soon as the white mist flew into range of the magic formation, it was surrounded by a drizzle of blue radiance, and a huge barrier of blue light appeared out of nowhere, trapping it within. At this moment, Feng Sanyang and the others all appeared around the barrier. They all had their flags lifted high and pointed at the light barrier, shooting out blue light beams with the thickness of a bowl. As the huge light barrier absorbed the beams, its shine became increasingly brighter and its color became deeper. After this occurred, the yellow and golden streaks of light immediately flew to above the light barrier. The light then faded away to reveal Elder Miao and burly man with long, messy hair. Good, well done. Next, you must withstand the beast's counterattack and allow us to use this opportunity to take it out with our rare treasures. Elder Miao shouted out with a joyful expression. After a mutual glance with Elder Gu, the 2 each reached for their chest and took out a pair of ancient, worn copper long spears. Other than their dull, shineless tips, there was nothing else of note. The 2 core formation elders of the 6 united palaces grew solemn and started muttering to themselves. The long spears then floated away from their grasps and released a yellow glow that gradually grew brighter. At that moment, the infant carp beast seemed to realize it was trapped. After a series of mournful infant cries, the huge, 300-meter-wide white mist suddenly shrank back towards its center. In the blink of an eye, it shrank to about 40 meters, forming a milky white barrier of mist. At the same time, thunderous wails came from the mist and momentously turned into a single cry, deafening the cultivators surrounding the formation and causing them to feel alarmed. After the infant's wails suddenly stopped, countless, fist-sized spheres of blue light shot out from the mist, launching an overbearing assault against the blue light barrier. The fierce momentum of the attack caused everyone's heart to skip a beat. When the light spheres were 30 meters away from the barrier, they released shining azure clouds. A fraction of the light spheres flashed within their clouds and faded away, only to appear again above the white mist. Afterwards, it struck down, a portion of these attacks had actually returned, dodging away from the formation spell. However, the light spheres were truly great in number, and a majority of them managed to strike the blue barrier. Suddenly, both the blue light barrier and the white mist violently erupted with white radiance, but the white mist's light disappeared with a single flash. As for the light barrier, its walls were shaking. The blue and white light flickered, interweaving with one another as if the light barrier were about to collapse. Everyone, quickly use more magic power. This is one of the infant carp beast's killing moves, Divine Waterstar Thunder. We only have to persist for a few minutes more. Feng Sanyang shouted out with a flustered expression. She then took the initiative to say an incantation and spurted out some blood essence towards the banner in her hand. Its blue light flourished, releasing a light beam several times thicker than its original, which immediately steadied the light barrier. When the others saw this, they could only perform their own techniques to draw the entirety of their body's magic power to forcefully support the formation. Han Li was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected that the infant carp beast would so quickly fight with all its might. This demon beast's ferociousness was truly beyond reason. Up above the magic formation, the two core formation cultivators' copper spears began a strange transformation. As they were chanting a mysterious incantation with solemn expressions, the yellow light emitted from the spears grew larger inch by inch, and the long spears started to point down towards the center of the white mist. The infant carp beast within the white mist seemed to sense the danger that was above it and suddenly released a deafening cry. The white mist gradually rotated at increasingly faster speeds. After a short moment, it had formed a huge whirlwind and swept up a huge torrent of water. The tempest also carried bits of blue radiance, extremely dangerous units of divine waterstar thunder. Qing Swansea and company became aghast at the sight and couldn't help but nervously glance at Feng Sanyang. However, she appeared equivalently terrified and didn't seem to know what astonishing magic technique the infant carp beast had used. Han Li's expression became gloomy as he silently ordered Crooked Soul to send the entirety of his magic power into the formation. Although he didn't know what divine ability the infant carp beast had used, it appeared that the attack would free the demon beast. With that in mind, Han Li couldn't help but look towards the sky and saw that the two long spears had already become about 30 meters long, faintly releasing a clear, pleasant ring. The two core formation elders then formed a strange hand incantation while rigidly staring at the huge spears. Their initial incantation still continued on as their expressions became intense and their foreheads were faintly laden with sweat. As the bewildering cries of the beast continued, the huge, white-blue tempest suddenly collided against the light barrier like an overbearing strike of lightning. As it was over 100 meters tall, it carried an astonishing pressure. The faces of the middle-aged Confucian scholar and the young woman by his side paled as if they were drained of blood. As the direction of this fearsome attack was towards his corner of the formation, he couldn't help but inwardly complain without end. He helplessly gritted his teeth and enveloped his body in a dazzling barrier interwoven with both yellow and blue radiance. Afterwards, he rigidly held onto the formation flag and poured the entirety of his spiritual power into the flagpole, causing the flag to shoot out a light beam that was many times thicker than before. Just as this happened, the huge tempest struck the barrier, losing its momentum and seeming to have no effect. Suddenly, sounds of thunder, cries, and ruptures suddenly rang out. Although the youth, Wu Chou, was also an early core formation cultivator, he cultivated the finest devil art in the scattered star seas, the profound Yin art. He was far above common core formation cultivators. Moreover, he had the backing of martial ancestor Zenith Yin, an evil devil lord known to all of the scattered star seas that nobody dared to lightly provoke. But to have Wu Chou to take away the infant carp beast before their eyes was a huge loss of face for the 6 united palaces. Not only would the entirety of their efforts be in vain, but they would also appear weak and easily bullied, stifling the future growth of the 6 united palaces. At this moment, Elder Gu and Elder Miao started to have a silent discussion, and their expressions continuously alternated between clear and gloomy. Wu Chou coldly snorted and arrogantly walked to the side of the infant carp beast. His hand flashed with black radiance and a pitch-black devilish saber appeared in his hand. After chopping the demon beast's strange head open with his saber, he searched through the head for the demon core without any restraint. As for the 2 women, they vigilantly watched Elder Miao and Gu in the sky. Feng Sanyang's face became extremely unsightly, but since Elder Miao and Gu still hadn't said anything, she didn't dare to act. Han Li and the others silently gazed on, not daring to say a word. They were fearful of inviting disaster upon themselves. Not longer after, Wu Chou fished out a jade blue sphere from the demon beast's head with his face full of delight. But his gaze then turned to the 4 wondrous items that were held in the demon beast's limbs, and he wore an avarice expression. But just as he lifted his devilish saber, Elder Gu stopped him, speaking with a deep voice. Young Island Lord, your ancestor could be said to have a relationship of old friendship with our palaces. You can take the infant carp beast's other items. However, our 6 united palaces requires the demon core. We must take it back or else we will not return. Elder Gu spoke with an indifferent tone, showing not the slightest emotion. When Wu Chou heard this, he coldly laughed and continued to chop down, ignoring his words. Breaking the demon beast's grasp, he tightly gripped the blue coral in his hands. Having seen this, Elder Gu revealed a softer expression and sighed, helplessly transmitting his voice towards Wu Chou. Upon hearing him, Wu Chou suddenly halted his saber and revealed an expression of astonishment. He lowered the devilish saber in his hands and opened and closed his mouth in disbelief as though he wanted to say something. Elder Gu then expressionlessly said a few additional words. This strange scene was completely baffling to Han Li and the others. As for Elder Miao, he expressionlessly floated in the air and turned a blind eye to what was happening. I don't believe you. Give me evidence of your status. Wu Chou suddenly shook his head and coldly shouted. It's unclear whether or not it was deliberate, but he suddenly shouted this out without using a voice transfer technique. When Han Li and the others heard this, they couldn't help but feel puzzled. After giving each other a mutual glance, Elder Gu and Miao revealed a furious expression. Fine, here is proof of our status. With an ice-cold expression, he waved his arm and released a black light. Wu Chou caught it without any effort. Han Li attentively gazed at this with a thumping heart, but he was only able to clearly see the item by relying on his powerful spiritual sense. It was a command medallion carved and painted in the shape of a malevolent ghost head that released a faint black qi. After carefully examining it, Wu Chou seemed to recognize it. Han Li's heart thumped, and he faintly felt a foreboding premonition. He hastily turned his head around, but what he saw left him fearful. The others appeared bewildered and were glancing at the actions of the 3 core formation cultivators. However, Qing Xuanzi's face appeared deathly white and he started to fall back with tightened fists in complete silence. In the blink of an eye, he was already 100 meters away. When he saw Han Li looking at him, he was initially startled before revealing an unsightly, bitter smile. Afterwards, he wordlessly transformed into an azure streak, fleeing away at the greatest speed he could muster. This sight caused Han Li's heart to sink. He instantly reacted, patting his storage pouch and hastily withdrawing his divine wind boat. After dragging Crooked Soul onto the magic tool, he soon turned into a streak of white light and hastily fled in the direction of the small, unnamed island. Qing Xuanzi's and Han Li's strange actions left Feng Sanyang and the other cultivators stunned, feeling great bafflement. When Elder Gu and Miao saw this, they revealed cold expressions. Elder Gu then sinisterly said, "We will take responsibility to kill the 2 that fled. Elder Brother Wu, I will leave the rest to you." Without waiting for Wu Chao's response, Elder Gu and Miao turned into two streaks of light, disappearing without a trace in the direction of Hanli and Qing Xuanzi. Wu Chou coldly snorted. Although he appeared unwilling, he gazed at the bewildered Foundation establishment cultivators with killing intent. Humph. You all sure aren't lucky, having witnessed something you shouldn't have. Now, this young master will be taking your souls. Wu Chou spread open his arms and covered the nearby sky and earth with a black, evil wind in an instant, the astonishingly dense pressure instantly engulfing Feng Sanyang and the others. 1. Chou can mean ugly as he is described. Also describes certain Qi thieves. With the time this bought, Han Li's 7 top-grade magic tools had arrived in front of Crooked Soul and continuously revolved around him, forming a black-white barrier of light streaks. Naturally, these top-grade magic tools were also incapable of withstanding the weakened light blade attacks. The black dragon claws and the 5 white flying blades twinkled as they revolved, merely becoming fireflies. Without anything to block the swarm of crescent light blades, they chopped towards Crooked Soul who stood motionlessly in front of Hanli. Crooked Soul suddenly let out a world-shaking roar, shedding off the blood-red light that surrounded his body. In the blink of an eye, the light turned into a huge red flood dragon, charging forward with brandished claws and bared fangs. Just as the red light and the light blades collided, the puppet soldiers at Han Li's side released their light arrows for a timely addition to the flood dragon's attack, causing a momentary deadlock. Han Li was ecstatic at how the event had played out, but Elder Gu revealed astonishment. But soon after, the core formation cultivator snorted with disdain and raised his hands as a burst of yellow radiance flourished from behind him. When Han Li saw this, he grew alarmed, as he had spent most of his precious magic tools blocking the last wave of attacks. If his enemy were to unleash another wave of incisive attacks, he would surely meet his end. While Han Li was lost in fear, the sneering core formation cultivator's complexion suddenly changed. Perhaps due to heavenly intervention, his cheeks flushed with an abnormal shade of red before soon turning pale. Afterwards, the yellow light behind his body dimmed, and his trembling body doubled over from pain. Elder Gu suddenly felt furious alarm. He was well aware that this was caused by the rash use of his true origin despite not recovering from the earlier damage to his origin qi. However, he only needed to suppress his injuries for a moment more to easily get rid of Han Li. This turn of events left Han Li wild with joy. He instantly reacted, taking advantage of this opportunity by grabbing Crooked Soul and then flying down towards the nameless island at the speed of lightning, leaving behind the flood dragon and puppet soldiers as he was unable to retrieve them in time. Elder Gu was furious with embarrassment. If he truly allowed Han Li to escape from his hand, he would be made a fool of. Vexed, he could only allow his injuries to somewhat worsen. Gritting his teeth, he made use of his entire body's spiritual power and forcefully suppressed his injuries before he resolutely chased after Han Li as a streak of blinding yellow light. Flying at great speed, Han Li managed to travel 100 meters in an instant. Just as he stepped into the perimeter of the spell formation, the yellow streak of light chased after him, nearly entering the formation at the same time. Just as Elder Gu smirked while thinking he would be able to kill the two in one blow, his eyes suddenly flashed with light and he saw a huge change of scenery. The nameless island was nowhere to be seen and he found himself above a huge jade sea with an immense pressure holding him in place. Formation spell. Elder Gu's expression grew solemn. Although he was somewhat shocked as to why there was a formation spell here, he didn't feel any panic. After all, the nearby fluctuations of the formation spell indicated it wasn't some impressive grand formation. He was confident he'd be able to break through it with ease. With that thought, Elder Gu's expression grew cold, and his body shone with dazzling yellow light. Naturally, what Han Li saw in his Jadewater Azure armor formation was completely different than what his core formation, Senior, saw. After flashing forward a few times on his divine wind boat, he easily left the great formation. With thoughts of fleeing to as far away as possible, Han Li turned his head towards the formation. Han Li's expression became gloomy. He saw Elder Gu transform into a yellow bolt of lightning, wildly striking against the formation spell's restrictions. As Han Li saw that he was about to break through, Han Li's expression continuously alternated between clear and gloomy. If Han Li were to flee, his pursuer would escape and give chase once more. Given the great discrepancy in speed between his pursuer's magic treasure and his divine wind boat, he'd definitely be chased down. As Han Li hesitated, several layers of the formation spell's restrictions were broken through. Having then come to a decision, Han Li's eyes flashed with killing intent. He called out to Crooked Soul without hesitation and stealthily approached Elder Gu under the cover of the spell formation. But as they were approaching Elder Gu, their target seemed to sense something as he was unbridledly breaking through the spell formation. Elder Gu suddenly stopped and vigilantly looked around with a stern expression. Han Li wrinkled his brow. A small, azure flag then appeared into his hand with a flash of light, the formation's master control flag. After whispering an indiscernible incantation, Han Li suddenly tossed the flag. The flag turned into a streak of azure light, merging with the formation. Afterwards, the scene before Elder Gu's eyes changed once more. He was now surrounded by a surging storm, and the original 600 kilograms of pressure suppressing him suddenly multiplied, causing his body to feel sluggish. He clearly felt that due to the formation spell's pressure, his enemy's ceaseless attacks, and his lack of magic power from the use of his immemorial bowl, the yellow radiance protecting his body would not last. Without any regard for the consequences, he used a secret technique to forcefully withdraw magic power. But before this was completed, Han Li's incantation produced an ice-cold sound. Suddenly, the chaotic seawaters surrounding Elder Gu began to swirl, momentarily increasing the huge pressure affecting his body by several fold. As the yellow light protecting his body was brought to its final glimmers, it released a mournful groan under Elder Gu's incredulous gaze before it finally disappeared without a trace. With nothing left to obstruct the flying needles, they immediately pierced through his vitals in a flash of red light, bringing Elder Gu to his knees. A silver light flashed to reveal Han Li silently appearing at his side, and the six united palaces. Elder Gu's fine head then landed over 10 meters away. Immediately after, a fountain of blood shot out from the headless corpse, densely filling the air with the scent of blood. Han Li let out a long breath, but quickly stepped forward to the side of the corpse to snatch its storage pouch. At the same time, Crooked Soul reached out to collect the yellow bowl magic treasure. With that, Han Li and Crooked Soul quickly fled away out of the formation in the divine wind boat. After flying for only 15 meters, Han Li plunged the boat into the ocean and submerged himself about 100 meters down. Afterwards, he put away his divine wind boat and took out orsevering red muslin cloth, wrapping it around Crooked Soul and himself. They then used the nameless incantation to restrain their chi. Not long after this was done, a formidable and wrathful spiritual sense arrived nearby, searching from up above the nearby sea. Although the spiritual sense made a fine examination, its owner was unable to find any trace of Han Li or Crooked Soul. After furiously sweeping his spiritual sense through the nearby area once more, he hurriedly rushed away to another area. After this, Han Li finally felt truly at ease. Naturally, he wouldn't foolishly make a sudden emergence from the sea. Instead, he released a blue light barrier to separate him and Crooked Soul from the ocean and had Crooked Soul enter meditation. The concealment within the ocean lasted for over half a month. During those days, the owner of the huge spiritual sense was unwilling to give up and repeatedly searched the nearby seas several times. But as Hanli had always noticed him coming and had restrained his qi beforehand, he was never successful. Now that the spiritual sense hadn't appeared for several days, Hanli finally dared to move. After slowly traveling over 50 kilometers away, he finally flew out of the seawater, got his bearings, and flew off at his greatest speed. Naturally, he couldn't return to Stalwart Star Island, and would have to find somewhere else to stay. Chapter 385, Sea Ape Island. Hanli gently held the pill between two fingers and brought it to his eye, carefully examining it before revealing a faint smile. It seemed that the fight to flee wasn't a wasted effort. As he had acquired several dustfall pills, the odds of his core formation should somewhat increase. After properly putting away the medicine pills, Hanli carefully stored away the bottle in his storage pouch. Now, Hanli had to find a location that was both safe and had an abundance of spiritual qi. So long as either Hanli or Crooked Soul managed to reach core formation, they would have a chance when fighting against any core formation cultivator that wished to hunt them down. However, core formation wasn't something that could be accomplished in a short amount of time. Other than genius cultivators blessed with heavenly spiritual roots, other cultivators require enough spirit medicines and time to break through the bottleneck. Spirit Snow Water and Liquid Heaven Fire are two such materials required for cultivators that wish to form their core. While they aren't required in order to succeed in core formation, the success rate without them is so astronomically low that it would cause cultivators to spit blood. Although there wasn't an official statistic, it is said to be less than 1%. Apart from these two items, many other spirit medicines can also be taken to increase the odds of success for core formation, but none of them were as effective as Spirit Snow Water and Liquid Heaven Fire. Unfortunately, taking multiples of these medicines would prove to have no effect. It wasn't like refining qi during meditation where it was optimal to take appropriate amounts of other spirit medicines. In fact, it would most likely prove to have an opposite effect. But what was laughable was not only were the effects of the other medicines far inferior to that of the Spirit Snow Water and Liquid Heaven Fire, they required herbs that were more rare and harder to find. In addition, these medicines would often require several thousand-year-old herbs to create. Ordinary cultivators wouldn't have such mighty spending power. At best, they would have one or two luxurious additions to their Spirit Snow Water and Liquid Heaven Fire. Of course, this didn't pose a problem for Hanli. Apart from the pills requiring a few rare spirit herbs he didn't have or had never heard of, he had refined over 10 spiritual medicines to aid in core formation, all of which were now safely stored inside his storage pouch. But what was most surprising was that these medicines didn't require innate true fire to be refined. They were simply mixed together like ordinary medicines of the mortal world. In addition, these pill formulas could easily be found in ancient records. When Hanli initially found them, he was stunned for quite a while. Even to this day, he was still left puzzled. As for the 5 dustfall pills he acquired, they were extremely rare supplementary medicines that all cultivators nearing core formation desired. However, even with the aid of these many medicine pills, the probability of success in core formation wouldn't be vastly higher than those without. According to Hanli's research, his mind-bogglingly extravagant method of core formation would only raise his odds of success by 10% at most when compared to other cultivators. On the whole, taking medicine should be a bit better than not, but this was only Hanli's opinion. Additionally, core formation wasn't something that could be concluded in merely 10 days or half a month. According to ancient records and the core formation experience of Li Huayuan, Hanli's former master, it would take about 3 to 5 years to conclude. The specific duration would depend on an individual's own aptitude. From here on out, he would have to avoid feeling great emotion, avoid any battles with others, and find a place with acceptable spiritual qi. Thus, it was imperative that Hanli found an island to seclude himself and attempt core formation, even if it were somewhat sparse regarding spiritual qi. With that in mind, Hanli took out a jade slip that contained a huge map of the seas with Stalwart Star Island and the other two main islands at the center. Hanli submerged his spiritual sense into the slip for quite some time. After eventually finding his approximate location, he then searched for remote, small-sized islands. After the time it took to cook a meal, Hanli withdrew his spiritual sense from the jade slip with a thoughtful expression. He looked at the seas and the blazing sun in the sky before finding his desired direction, turning into a streak of white light and disappearing across the horizon. Along the way, Hanli stopped at a few desolate islands to recover his magic power. He avoided any islands that were inhabited, as he was fearful of leaving behind traces for anyone pursuing him. After changing direction several times, Hanli finally found the region he wished to travel to and quickly flew off. 2 months later, Hanli and Crooked Soul appeared above a remote island. This island wasn't nearly as large as Stalwart Star Island, but it was quite a bit larger than ordinary small islands, barely large enough to be considered a medium-sized island. It was the Sea Ape Island that Hanli had endured a long, arduous journey for. The island had few mortals and no cultivators above chi condensation, along with no island lord to speak of. It was a place of freedom where everyone could come and go as they pleased. As for the island's name, the nearby seas were occupied by the particularly strange low-grade demon beast, sea apes. This demon beast was almost entirely the same as a common ape, apart from its ability to use the low-grade water arrow magic technique and its considerable intelligence. By adulthood, it was nearly as intelligent as an 8-year-old child, and cultivators are fond of capturing them to act as workers for their immortal's cave. Although sea apes are considered demon beasts, they are capable of being easily subdued by 6th-layer chi condensation cultivators. As such, a few small ships would arrive annually, hiring low-grade cultivators to capture and sell the beasts. There were a few small merchants that had collectively set up a formation spell on the island and had established a long storefront that bought living sea apes year-long. Every so often, a ship would arrive and leave with a large quantity of sea apes. As such, the island became a gathering point for low-grade cultivators striving to acquire spirit stones. But after a formation spell was established, rogue cultivators came to Sea Ape Island for long-term residence as it contained a massive spirit vein of fair quality. Although the spirit vein couldn't be said to be exceptional, TT was so large and broad that the entire island was suitable for low-grade cultivation. Chapter 386, Core Formation. In 4 years, Hanli meditated for several days in his hidden room before taking the spirit medicines. After reaching his peak state, he took out a small bottle of liquid heaven fire. He lifted his head and placed a few drops into his mouth before hastily putting away the bottle. He then closed his eyes, waiting for the medicinal power to flare. Shortly after, Hanli felt his meridians start to scald. His true origin had turned into something like boiling water and started to quickly flow through his meridians. Hanli was initially dumbstruck, but he hastily took out an unknown spiritual medicine and instantly swallowed it down. Afterwards, he started to cultivate the Azure Essence sword art in an attempt to break through his bottleneck. The day that Hanli broke through to the 7th layer would be the day that Hanli reached core formation stage. Before this, Hanli had instructed Crooked Soul in the neighboring room to also take the liquid heaven fire and other spiritual medicines with his spiritual sense. The divine bloodlight that Crooked Soul cultivated was considered a quick success Devil Dao cultivation art. Normally, there would be no possibility of core formation, but with the 5 elements blood cores, his chances of core formation were the same as Hanli's. Crooked Soul didn't use a cultivation art to form a core, he instead swallowed the 5 elements blood cores and refined the core's power to form a fiend core. But in contrast, as his core formation process was much simpler than Hanli's, Hanli didn't need to pay further attention to Crooked Soul after giving out his orders. Although Hanli's success in core formation was uncertain, he was still going to make a serious attempt. Even if he were to fail, he would accumulate a large amount of experience for his next attempt. With that thought, Hanli gradually shut out all sense of the external world and deeply sank into bitter cultivation. At that moment, Hanli became completely oblivious to both time and the outside world. Time passed day by day, as springs passed and winters arrived. 4 years later, Sea Ape Island was quite lively and disordered. There was a faint atmosphere of excitement present in the island city and the docks. At the time of noon that day, on a remote mountain on the island, a scene occurred that left a cultivator in secluded cultivation dumbstruck. He saw the faraway cloudless dark blue skies suddenly filled with clouds and wind. A dense, black cloud had appeared out of nowhere, enveloping some barren mountain. With flashes of silver lightning and claps of deafening thunder, it appeared as if a crazed serpent was wildly dancing. At that same time, the heaven-earth spiritual chi from all around the barren mountain started to revolve around it with a long cry. A huge vortex spanning 2 kilometers formed underneath the black clouds, thoroughly sucking away the spiritual chi from over 10 kilometers away and leaving the nearby row cultivators in great astonishment. They all walked out of their places of cultivation and hastily flew towards the barren mountain. Although these cultivators were ignorant and ill-informed, many of them realized that this astonishing scene was clearly caused by a senior succeeding in core formation. There was another core formation cultivator that appeared in the scattered star seas. However, it was extremely surprising to the row cultivators that someone would attempt to form their core in an area with such sparse spiritual chi. As they felt both awe and admiration, they wanted to see the result. They even had the faint hope of forming some sort of connection to this senior, perhaps they could actually become his disciple. Without waiting for them to arrive, the distant vortex had already absorbed enough spiritual chi, and with the huge cry of a phoenix, the vortex collapsed, scattering its remaining spiritual chi. The scattered spiritual chi then faintly shined with rainbow light, creating a beautiful sight. Afterwards, the cloud dispersed, the lightning and thunder disappeared, and everything returned to normal, returning to fine sunny weather. At that moment, those row cultivators that flew near the barren mountain suddenly heard an extremely cold voice: "Those that approach this mountain without permission will die." Those grim words were completely emotionless, causing the many low-grade cultivators nearby to grow pale. They all suddenly stopped and looked at each other. It was quite obvious that this senior who succeeded in core formation did not wish for anybody to disturb him. After glancing at each other for a while, they all had no intention of disobediently moving forward and silently left. Not long after, the news of a cultivator having just reached core formation had spread throughout Sea Ape Island, leaving those who had been unaware shocked. They were extremely puzzled as to why a cultivator would choose to undergo core formation at Sea Ape Island. Soon after, a huge amount of low-grade cultivators started to create new Immortals caves at the center of the barren mountains. Although the core formation cultivator had given a warning and they didn't dare to disobey and approach too closely to the mountain, the row cultivators all chose to cultivate nearby in hopes that they may perhaps meet him. For a time, the nearby lands were flourishing with people. But unbeknown to them, the barren mountain had long been abandoned, and the core formation cultivator in question was flying in the sky about 1,000 kilometers away. He had a tranquil youth flying with him, Hanli, who had failed to form his core. As Hanli glanced at the meditating crooked soul, his face was calm despite feeling joy in his heart. In truth, he had left seclusion about a year ago after having taken spiritual medicines and meditated for 3 years. He couldn't help but give up. This attempt at core formation had definitely failed as there wasn't the slightest trace of his true essence solidifying. As such, he stopped cultivating and focused on assisting Crooked Soul in core formation. Along with the forceful assistance of several other spirit medicines, Crooked Soul met a massive success a few days before and eventually formed a fiend core. This extremely smooth process left Hanli quite surprised and beyond happy. After Hanlik shouted at the rogue cultivators that came to look, he immediately abandoned the Immortal's Cave and secretly brought Crooked Soul away from Sea Ape Island. He now wanted to return to Minor Expanse Island and see whether or not his true Immortal's Cave had been discovered. He was confident that even if his pursuers were patient, there would be no way that they would have a core formation cultivator standing watch at Minor Expanse Island. If it was unguarded, he would take away all of the wondrous bugs from his true Immortal's Cave and fly far away, completely abandoning the Southwest Sea. Chapter 387, Gold-Devouring Beetles. Hanli had kept his wondrous insects in several tens of concealed stone rooms of differing sizes. Fearful that they would escape, he had set up a small formation in each of them so that they wouldn't break down the walls. According to Hanli's thoughts, as these wondrous bugs were young despite having high rankings, these ordinary restrictions should be enough to contain them. But now, his formations were no longer present and the stone doors were filled with hexagonal-shaped holes. Hanli was aghast and willed Crooked Soul to take a large step forward and open the nearest stone door, revealing a completely empty room devoid of life. Hanli let out a light sigh. Although he had already prepared himself, he still felt rather depressed. After sweeping his gaze over the room, he turned around to look at the stone door. Then he wordlessly walked out and squatted in front of the broken door. The stone door was very strangely damaged, with small holes of similar sizes densely scattered across it. But what Hanli didn't understand was why the holes were so rough, unlike the smooth cuts magic tools would produce. Hanli wrinkled his brow and slowly stood up. He slowly shut his eyes and swept his spiritual sense throughout the rest of the rooms. Having found that the others' rooms were the same, Han-Li felt quite a bit of heartache. But suddenly, his face moved. He opened eyes to reveal a cold glint and walked towards a different hidden room. The room was also empty, but Hanli entered without any hesitation and crouched, picking up something from the limestone floor and placing it in his palm. He then brought it up to his eye and saw that it was a bean-sized insect shell that twinkled with a silvery light. It was very beautiful and appeared to be entirely created out of silver. Hanli then touched the insect shell to find that its shell was extremely smooth and very hard. After lowering his head in contemplation, he was certain that this wasn't the insect shell of anything he was raising. Han-Li's face grew solemn, and he narrowed his eyes. From the center of this room, Hanli started to search every inch of his Immortal's Cave with his spiritual sense. Hanli was confident that he'd be able to find something. After a moment, Hanli made a surprising discovery in his medicine garden. A sparkling silver sphere hung on the thick trunk of a flower tree. A sparkling silver sphere, an undoubtedly recent addition to the Immortal's Cave. Hanli called out to Crooked Soul and gloomily walked towards the medicine garden. The silver sphere wasn't very large and was only the size of the head of a small child. But its sparkling, bewitching silver light was extremely eye-catching. Hanli stood at the medicine garden's entrance and attentively stared at the silver sphere in silence. He felt that he had heard of this silver sphere before, but he couldn't recall anything about it at the moment. Regardless, he was certain that this object was related to the silver insect shell he had previously found. Insect shell. Hanli's mind suddenly thought of something. He hastily patted his storage pouch and a green jade slip appeared in his hand. This was the document of detailing the insect cultivation experiences of the controlling spirit cultivator that previously occupied Crooked Soul's body. After submerging his spiritual sense into it, Hanli immediately found that the description of a rank 12 insect seemed relevant. Gold-devouring beetles, rank 12 amongst the wondrous bugs. Travels in vicious swarms. It loves to eat other wondrous bugs and is adept at consuming the 5 metals 1 and heaven-earth spiritual chi. They also cannot tolerate heat or cold. It is extremely vicious and tends to amass into a sphere. It tends to perch on spiritual trees. Jade and wood are capable of capturing it. They were much different than ordinary webs. Their extremely finely woven webs left gaps too small for the silver beetles to escape. The gold-devouring beetles detected danger and immediately turned into silver arrows, fiercely attempting to shoot out of the web. Poo-poo. The two spider webs firmly held against the assault from the silver arrows, turning the web into a ball and causing the gold-devouring beetles to grow frantic. After releasing a deafening screech, they started to tear at the spider webs with their teeth, intending to break free of the spider web and escape. The two spiders gave them no such opportunity and continued to spew out mouthfuls of white liquid. In the blink of an eye, the beetles were trapped in a huge ball of webs. Hanley knew that the spider webs wouldn't be able to trap the gold-devouring bugs for long, so he hastily took out a jade box and quickly jammed the ball of webs into it. Afterwards, he closed the box and placed it into his storage pouch. Normally, demon beasts could only be contained in a specialized spirit beast pouch, otherwise, they would face suffocation from the lack of air in an ordinary storage pouch. However, high-ranking wondrous bugs were different as they had incomparable vitality and could survive in a storage pouch without air. Otherwise, that controlling spirit sect cultivator definitely wouldn't have carried so many of his insect larvae in his storage pouch. Naturally, if he truly wished to use the beasts to fight, a specialized bag for spirit beasts would be best. Not only could he summon them easier, but it would also be more convenient to train them. Most importantly, the specialized pouch was able to store demon beasts at a reduced size, where ordinary storage pouches while incapable of shrinking living things. Thus, even if it were a wondrous bug demon beast, they would still have to be stored in a spirit beast pouch if they were too large. Having put away the jade box, Hanley swept his spiritual sense through his immortal's cave once more, fearful that he had missed something. Apart from discovering numerous dents, small holes in his storeroom, Hanley didn't discover anything else. Those small holes should have been marks left behind from when the gold-devouring beetles dug into his immortal's cave. Since Hanley no longer dared to stay behind in this immortal's cave, he immediately left and soared off after retrieving his 3 magic formations. 1. 5 metals, gold, silver, copper, iron, and tin. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.